The latest from the locker room, the latest from the podium, the latest scuttle from the players.
On your proud home of 49ers football. Touchdown! KNBR, the sports leader. Your faithful fix with your host, Larry Krueger, begins.
We'll take phone calls. We'll talk Niners for a full hour. Fired up. Really excited.
Now.
And we are off and running. It's Niners Nightly on a Monday. Hope everybody's having a great day. It is Monday, January the 6th, 2025, and welcome to Niners Nightly. And I spent a good portion of the morning taking another look at that disastrous Niners-Cardinals game last night. And I'll tell you, it's not more entertaining on the rewatch than it was the first time around. But I had a chance to go, do a live stream this morning. Had a chance earlier today on my YouTube channel. Had a chance to talk to Greg and Greg, the Gregs. Stopped by with Greg Papa and Greg Silver this morning and tried to make sense of Niners Cardinals. And then, so I did I watched the game. Then I did the quick rewatch last night. Okay, then I was going to be on with Greg this morning. I want to make sure I have some answers. So I did some studying and some breakdown and looked at it again. And then I spent the last couple hours, hit the gym and then hit the film for the third time, this time with all my notes and all my this and that and all the different ways I like to look at it. And I like to group it, so I want to see what the Niners do inside their 30. I want to see what they do in the red zone. I want to see what they do in the middle of the field. I want to see what they do on third down. I want to see what they do I want to see what, how often Nick Sorensen blitzes. I want to see, if he blitzes, is he bringing exotics? Are they 5-man pressures? Are they 6-man pressures? Is it more than that? So, there's an awful lot that goes into the film breakdown, but I'll tell you, it was ugly. It was ugly. And I say that just because I kind of felt for the first time, like all year, like the Niners were just kind of going through the motions at the end of that game. It wasn't a good film to watch. I guarantee you Nick Sorensen would love that film to not exist because his defense just quit. I mean, that's what it looked like to me. It looked like they just stopped playing. Those final couple sequences were just brutal. I mean, the last two touchdowns were just a rough watch, to say the least. So we do have a great hour for you. We're not going to book any fancy guests tonight. We're just going to let you have your say at 808 KNBR. I've got some themes that definitely stand out. There's a bunch of things that came out of Santa Clara today that we will discuss this hour. But I kind of want you guys to weigh in on a couple of different things. One is Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's extension window is now, with the regular season coming to an end, it's officially open. And he spoke today in Santa Clara and said he'd love to get an extension done quickly. Love to get it done quickly, which kind of makes it seem like maybe he's willing to not take, 60 million plus, in a contract. That's the going rate right now for a franchise quarterback. Dak Prescott signed for $60 million a year. AAV. But the question is, what's the right number? What is the right number for Brock? And should the Niners extend Brock Purdy right now based on what they know about him? Or should they force him to play out the last year of his contract and kind of slow play this? Sounds like Brock would like to get it done quickly. Sounds like the 49ers would like to get that contract extension done this offseason. But should they extend him right away, or have you seen enough? Do you feel like you have all the information when it comes to Brock Purdy, or would you prefer to wait? And I guess that might really be predicated on what's the ask. What his agent is, a Nashville-based agent named Kyle Strongen, I believe his name is. What's Kyle going to ask for on Brock's behalf? Brock sounds like he wants to get the deal done, but I'm sure Kyle, who doesn't have a lot of other big name clients, probably would love to show the agent world that he can get Brock Purdy top dollar. So I don't know that that's the case. He might be way more reasonable than that. He may have a price in mind. Who knows? Maybe him and the Niners have already exchanged figures, and they're already closing in on mutual, some kind of some ground that's comfortable for both sides. But Brock Purdy today told reporters that if a contract extension is an option, that he would like to get it done quickly and drama-free. And doesn't that sound like music to the ears for John Lynch after what he went through this year with CMC and Ayuk and Trent Williams? A player that actually wants to get it done, drama-free? Awesome. Let's get it done. But then it comes down to the particulars. So 808 KNBR is the phone number. We got a bunch of things we're going to get into tonight, including what I think the theme of this offseason needs to be. Who needs to stay, who needs to go, all that kind of stuff. We'll get into that. What next year looks like for the 49ers. But we open up the phone lines to you, and there's a few things I'd love to have you guys weigh in on. The first is the Purdy extension. How do you feel about it? How do you feel about Brock right now? The guy had a couple really good years, and then this year, everything just kind of bogged down. There was no CMC. Ayuk was never Ayuk. The Ayuk of this year was never as good as the Ayuk of last year. And then he got hurt. He was done for the year, maybe done. Who knows? Maybe done. We don't know how he's going to bounce back. That was a very serious injury. So they didn't have Trent for the second half of the year, didn't have Greenlaw, didn't have CMC, didn't have Ayuk. Debo has not been the same player as he's been in the past. Ricky Pearsall got shot early on. He couldn't help out early on. So you're getting nothing out of your first round draft choice. But how do you want John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers to play their Brock Purdy card? Do you extend him now? Do you extend him? Do you make him wait? Do you say, you know what? This year was so uncomfortable and so unlike the first couple of years that we don't want to sign you right now, because if we're going to sign you right now, you're coming in at our price, and our price is probably closer to, 40, 45 million a year, which is still a massive amount of money. It's a massive commitment to a player that you paid $1 million last year to. Now you're talking about paying him. Mahomes makes 45 a year. The going rate is probably between 50 and 60. But the only thing I would say to all the people say, well, that's the rate. Okay. But, just because other people are paying their quarterback 60 doesn't mean technically that you have to pay your quarterback 60. The other question is, or the other issue that I see is that every quarterback that makes north of $50 million a year, and there are about 10 of them, none of them have won rings. I think only Joe Burrow has even gone to a Super Bowl. The guys who have been rewarded handsomely at the top of the food chain, quarterback-wise, they're good players. They're making lots of money, but their teams don't win Super Bowls. And we'll find out if that changes. I mean, Jared Goff is making $55 million. The Lions look like they could be a Super Bowl team this year. But what would you like to see the Niners do with Brock Purdy? Sign him now, make him wait. And then what happens if, let's just say for the sake of this conversation, let's say his agent comes to you and says, I want record money, man. I want record-setting money. I want $60 million. I want $60 million that Dak Prescott got, or I want north of that. That's the floor. That's the floor, $60 million. Then what? Then what do you do? What do you do if you're John Lynch, Parag Marathe, and Kyle Shanahan? If Kyle Strongton, the agent for Brock Purdy, comes out and says, I want $60 million, or don't call me. Don't call me unless you're offering $60 million a year. Now, there's all different ways to structure it as far as years and guaranteed dollars and so on and so forth, AAV. I mean, there's different ways to look at it. And it may be one of these situations where the Niners sign him for some record-setting dollar figure, $65 million a year. But then upon the close examination, there's outs and there's ways that the Niners organization can protect themselves just in case Brock Purdy doesn't live up to that contract. So there could be some structuring elements in this thing that could make it kind of a win-win. The agent wins because everybody thinks he got, 60 million AAV. The player wins because he's getting a big money long-term extension, but the team also has coverage and protection against Brock Purdy having more years in the future like this year and less years in the future like his first couple years. I mean, a year ago, Brock Purdy was 4th in the MVP voting. How about that? 4th. Last year, 4th. This year, he's a Pro Bowl alternate. So before people walk around and start telling you that Brock Purdy was just S this year, Pro Bowl alternate. Okay? Was he great? No. Pro Bowl alternate. I mean, that has got to count for something. But that's the first thing I'd love to see you guys weigh in or hear you guys weigh in on tonight at 808 KNBR. Where are you with Purdy? I'll tell you where I'm at. I think he is good enough to win a championship with. I think he is. Is he Mahomes? No, he's not. Is he Lamar? No. Is he Josh Allen? No. Is he Joe Burrow? No. He is not an elite top-tier quarterback. He's not. I'm convinced of that. But I'm also convinced that he's good enough to win a championship with. And if you said, who is he, Krug? I think he's Jalen Hurts. I think he is a West Coast version of Jalen Hurts. So what would you say about Jalen Hurts? Good guy, leader, tough guy, little undersized, but he's already been to a Super Bowl and lost, just like Brock. But I think Jalen Hurts, you can win a Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts if you have the right line, if you have Saquon Barkley, if you have great receivers, if you got a Vic Fangio, a number one defense. That's Philly. That's Philly. Philly's in the running. I like Philly this year. I think Philly's got a real good shot of winning this weekend and potentially representing the NFC in the Super Bowl in New Orleans in February. I think Philly's good. I think Philly, I think Hurts is a good quarterback that can't do it all by himself. I think we saw that last year. But if you surround him with the right cast, he can definitely do it. Well, Hurts makes $55 million. So, and Philly has been able to surround him with a good roster despite the fact they're paying him $55 million. So, to me, that's kind of the neighborhood where I think Brock probably ought to be. Does he need to be 60, 65 million? No. And if I were the 49ers, I would fight like tooth and nail to make sure I could maintain a little bit more, cap flexibility, because if you pay him $65 million, it's going to be that much more difficult to build a Super Bowl championship roster around him. And I think Brock's also smart enough to know that, Mahomes is making 45 and he's winning Super Bowls, and Prescott's winning 60 and he's never going to win a Super Bowl. And, maybe it has nothing to do with the dollar figures, but it doesn't hurt to be a little bit cheaper in a cap sport where you can get a few more offensive linemen, a few more receivers, a few more pass rushers, a few more corners, a few more, just a better overall team. So that's the first one. What do you do? This is how I would play the Brock thing. I would offer him a contract right around Mahomes with all of it guaranteed. 3 years, $45 million. They're probably going to say no. But to me, that is where I want the conversation to start. And then I'll go to 50. But I don't want to go to mid-50s, and I don't want to go to 60, and I don't want to go to 65. I want to keep it between 45 and 50 in that range. And to me, that's reasonable. And when you factor in, it's a cap sport, and it's not like you're not going to do anything with the rest of the money. You're going to spend it on football players to help you win the championship, to help you win a Super Bowl. The 49ers, I think Brock Purdy last year, to say last year that Brock Purdy was a product of his weapons, I don't think was right. I think that's erroneous. But to see, it's not like he was only good because of his weapons. But anybody's going to be better with better weapons surrounding them. And this year, when you took those weapons away, look how much more difficult life was for Brock Purdy. He was running for his life. He was holding the ball. He was forcing it where he wouldn't force it. His entire risk reward value proposition got totally altered. His dials suddenly were altered as far as risk reward. He was taking big risks at inopportune moments when he really shouldn't have, just simply because he's got so much on his plate, so much pressure. The line's not protecting. The receivers are not getting open. It's all falling down on his head. And he bowed to some of that pressure as the season went on, and he wasn't as good. And his decision-making started to break down. And the play that I think of is that Rams game at the very end when he threw the pick. That was a first down pass play. You had 3 players open underneath. You had a free rusher in your face, and you floated it out there in the middle of the field, and it was a pick. And it wasn't just a pick. It was game over, season over. Your season ended on that pick. It was a first down pass play. There wasn't 5 seconds left in the game. There was plenty of time. There was no reason to take that level of risk in that moment. It just wasn't. And yet he did. So I think that the pressure of the whole position and the line breaking down and the receivers not separating, I think it all started to kind of, impact Brock Purdy's decision-making. And I think his decision-making is a big part of why you'd want to pay him in the first place. So if he doesn't make good decisions with the football, you don't want to pay him anymore. And that, I think, I don't think the 49ers are in that mode where they don't want to pay him, but I think that they saw the regression. And I think we all saw the regression. So 808 KNBR is the phone number. That's the first topic of the night. Do you sign Purdy now, or do you hedge your bet and say, you know what? No, he's got a contract for this year. Let him play out the final year of his contract. Let him be in a lame duck situation. Let him prove it again. Are you in that mode? Are the Niners in that mode? Will the Niners be in that mode if he demands $60 million plus? And what do you do if he does? What do you do if his agent says, I want $65 million a year, and don't call us if you're not offering that? Then what? What do you do? You try to bring in a Kirk Cousins? You try to bring in a Zach Wilson? You bring in a Mac Jones, a Daniel Jones? What do you do? What do you do if Brock says it's $65 million or the door? You're not paying him $65 million. I don't know that he'll be that strident and his agent will be that strident in their position. But that's the first question of the night. What do you do with Brock Purdy? What do you do with Brock Purdy's contract? What do you do if Brock Purdy's agent says, I want the bag, I want the big bag. I want the big bag. And then I'm not a believer in curses. I'm really not. But I'm starting to believe in the Madden curse. For the first time ever, a 49er was on the cover of the EA Madden 25 video game cover. And it's always, we've been talking about the curse. McCaffrey's on the cover this year. Did enough things go wrong for the 49ers to maybe, I don't know, never be on the cover again? I mean, I don't believe in these curses. I really don't. But, man, the 49ers have never been on the cover of that thing. The one year they are, it's just a tire fire, train wreck, ugly season, one of the ugliest seasons in the history of the franchise. I mean, this was a bad year by anybody's estimation. Do you believe in the Madden curse? I guess that is the second question of the night. And then give me the bright spot. You know, there is no such thing as a season that has no bright spots, right? There have been some bright spots. Pick your rookie. Dom Pooney, bright spot for sure. Pearsall, bright spot. At least in the last couple of games. Last 2 games for Ricky Pearsall, by the way, 18 targets, 14 catches, 210 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. The previous 5 games when he ran 110 routes and caught no balls, and I was calling him a bust. Well, you know what? You're a bust until you're not. And he's starting to really play, so good for him. But Pearsall's been a positive. Renardo's been a positive. Malik Mustafa's been a huge positive. There's been some veterans, JJ, Demo, Kittle, Mason. There have been some positives on this team this year. But what would you say is the most positive thing that we could possibly draw out of this train wreck known as the 2024 season. And as far as a theme, to me, the theme for the 49ers going into the future is just got to be a real basic theme, which is the Niners need more competition. More competition. Shanahan needs more competition. Lynch needs more competition. Purdy needs more competition. CMC needs more competition. The receivers, they need more there. Kittle, they need more there. The offensive line, they need more there. The Niners need to embrace the idea of more competition. That should be the theme of this offseason. Everybody in my mind is just a little too comfortable. A little too comfortable. You know, I mean, literally 3 weeks ago, I have Chris Forster telling me that Jake Brendel's playing great. Literally 4 weeks ago, I have Nick Sorensen telling me that Devondre Campbell is a leader on the team. I mean, seriously, stop gaslighting us with these preposterous lies, okay? Start speaking the truth. Or people are just going to have to call it out. And I want to see a little bit more accountability. Where was the accountability of Brian Schneider on his special teams unit? They were awful all year long. Did he lose his job? No. Why? Are we now the nicest people in America? Is Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch now a charity? Are the 49ers now a volunteer organization? If you don't do the job, you got to go. All right, simple as that. Schneider should be fired. You know, according to a rumor that I read today, the 49ers are planning to make big changes on their coaching staff and their medical staffs, with the first move being firing Brian Schneider, special teams coordinator. I hate calling for people's firings. I hate it. It's distasteful. I hate every aspect of it. But you know what? Accountability has to rule the day. And this year there was very little of it. Very little accountability. And he's got to go. I mean, he has got to go. As simple as that. And the other rumor that I read today is that the Niners are going to reevaluate Nick Sorensen, Brandon Staley, and the defensive position coaches in the coming days. The defense stopped playing altogether. Stop playing. You know, the offense is a major problem. The 49ers could not score to save their life against the Rams. But this last 2 games where the defense is just absolutely broken, nothing says we need a new defensive leader like the way the 49ers have played defense the last 2 games. Absolutely embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing. And it might be time to say goodbye to the wide 9. It might be time to go to the 3-4. It might be time to look for a coordinator who's got pelts on the wall, not a first-year guy with hope, but actually somebody who's got, you know, a Super Bowl ring, maybe somewhere in their house, or a Super Bowl appearance somewhere on their resume. You know, I mean, that to me, I mean, where's the accountability? If Sorensen and Staley return, where's the accountability? So the other rumor was that Sorensen and Staley are not guaranteed to return in 2025, and the source was quoted as saying they're both likely out. So there you go. I'm telling you what, I'm just passing along the rumors that I'm reading today online. All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take a time out. We're going to go over, before we get out of here, some of the other key decisions coming up. What do you do with Kyle Juszczyk? And we'll talk a little bit about the award winners as well. But 808 KNBR is the phone number. We'll start with your phone calls next segment. I've got a couple ideas on what the 49ers need more of and maybe what they need less of. But let's start with the Purdy extension, because Purdy sounds like he's eager to get one signed right away. And the Niners sound like they're eager to get one signed right away as well. But talk's cheap, and we'll see what happens when they start exchanging offers. But how do you play your hand with Brock Purdy? How do you play your cards here? Do you sign him now? Do you make him wait? If he asks for $60 million, do you say, you know what? That's preposterous. We're going in a different direction. How do you play your Purdy card if you're Parag and you're Kyle and you're John? 808 KNBR, the phone number. We'll take a break right here. We'll come back with your phone calls for the whole second half of the hour. It's Niners Nightly on the Sports Leader.
Now, from the O'Donnell Financial Group Sports Desk. Learn more at odfigroup.com. O'Donnell Financial Group, because planning is a process, not a product.
End of the line for the 49ers season. The boys all spoke at the locker cleanup day today, including Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, Fred Warner, and your personal favorite, the People's tight end, George Kittle. You can find those clips and more on KNBR.com, the KNBR app, and just check us out on YouTube.
faithful. Niners Nightly with Larry Krueger now continues on your proud home of 49ers football. KNBR, the sports leader.
We keep things rolling on a Monday on Niners Nightly. Larry Krueger with you. 808 KNBR, the phone number. We're going to take your calls right here. What do you do with Brock Purdy? Pay him now, pay him later. What if he demands $60 million plus? Are you going to pay him that after the year he just had? I don't know, man. I don't know. I like him, and I want to keep him as the Niners quarterback. But it takes two to tango. It's got to make sense. Things got to make sense. All right, let's go to the lines. Pete's in the city on the Sports Leader. Hey, Pete.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. What's going on?
So you stole my thunder.
Okay.
But you made all the right points. It's gonna be a happy balance. It's gonna take. I think Brock is, by origin, he was a humble kid. He came from a humble beginnings. He was raised well. He didn't have a lot of offers. Got a chance at Iowa State. Then does well for all those years. But I don't think he's ever let his ego get ahead of him. And so first, I think he is understanding that he's not that superstar. He's not what makes the team. He's not a Cam Newton type or, one of these superstar type physical presences. He is a system quarterback. He found a good home. So he's a realist in that regard. He knows his limitations. He's found a good place. And he knows that, the NFL stands for not for long, right? And you try to let your ego get ahead of you and you go for the big time, you might be gone. Look at Kirk Cousins, right? He's done. And I also think that he knows that he needs a system around him. He needs players, and he needs to be in the right system. So you got to pay for the others. He's just a part of it. He's not a superstar. So I think that number one, to answer your first question, was that
okay.
He understands what it takes. And I think if he's smart, he won't be shooting for the moon. He'll come into them with a reasonable number. There'll be a negotiation back and forth, and they'll come to some reasonable number, which I think it's more in the 30. I don't know the numbers, but
Sure.
30s, 40s, something.
Well, I mean,
more
Baker Mayfield
generic.
makes 30. Baker's making 3 years, 100. But if he were free today, he would make more. So a lot of people are like, "Oh, pay him the Baker deal." Well, yeah, sure, if you can get him to sign for $30 million a year. But I think that's going to be problematic considering the top of the scale is 60.
Well, and I think that they will. If he comes in too high, they're just going to go, "All right, kid, we liked you, we want you, but there's a limit, right?" And we can find someone who will work in our system.
Well, that's the question. I mean, and there are people. I had buddies of mine call me this morning, going, "Dude, Dobbs is better than Purdy," and I'm like, first of all, pump the brakes. Josh Dobbs in his career has started 15 times. He's got 2 wins and he's got 12, or 3 wins and 12 losses. So I mean, it's not, he was good. He was good yesterday for a while. And then until the 3 turnovers. But I thought,
so let me ask you a question.
Dobbs looked pretty good, but I don't, I'm not ready to make Dobbs the starter.
Let me ask you a question then.
Sure.
Does a guy like Kyle Shanahan prefer that system quarterback who can be conservative and stay within his system, or does he want a superstar? If you bring in that superstar, the 6'5", 250 guy who might need a little bit time to develop, the Anthony Richardson, maybe Kyle doesn't want that. He doesn't need that.
Well, I think that's a great point. I think that's a great point by you, because look at his dad. Name me the young quarterback that his dad took tons and tons and tons of time developing. He had 1 year of RG3, and then they quickly kind of moved off. Other than that, I mean, he's gotten it done with veteran quarterbacks. And some coaches are like that. John Gruden was like that. He won with Gannon. He didn't want rookies. And I get the sense that Shanahan doesn't mind a young player. That's why they traded, that's why they wanted to draft a Trey Lance. I just think he doesn't want the 3-4 years of ramp up that maybe a young quarterback may take.
Well, every draft, you have both types of guys available.
Yep.
You have the superstar, super athletic guy every single year. And who was the guy we were watching last night? Oh, the guy, Joe Milton, playing for the Patriots.
Yeah, how good did Joe Milton look yesterday?
Yeah, he looked amazing. Now, so
6'5", 250, he can throw it 90 yards in the air.
Right.
I'm a Joe Milton fan. I was hoping the Niners would take a flyer on him. But you're right. I mean, that's a great example. Do you want to take a chance on a guy with massive skill set who, if he figures it out, could be literally the best quarterback in the game because he's that big, that strong, that durable? But I mean, what are the chances that he can figure it out? I mean, I don't know. I mean, Joe Milton looked pretty good yesterday, but how does he look if you put him out there every week? I don't know.
There was a game the other night in college. It was Minnesota versus someone, and the kid Browser, who's been playing, I think, 4 or 5 years there, sounded like a similar story to Brock Purdy, and they made all the attributes like, this is a guy that I bet you San Francisco will go after. Because he's just a system kind of guy.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll say this. My plan would be to, sign Brock Purdy, have somebody there that could step in and play and you could win with, who's not a true backup. Somebody who's either a reclamation project a la Sam Darnold, or somebody who's got a little bit more upside than your typical Brandon Allen backup quarterback. But then I'll say this. I think it's imperative the 49ers, since, we know the stats on this, it takes, if you look at the last 30 years, the vast majority of the Super Bowl winning quarterbacks are Hall of Famers. There's only a few guys like Nick Foles or Brock Purdy who are like, really, really, solid, but they're not stars. So history tells us you need stars to win. So I would say draft a quarterback in every single draft every year and keep looking for that next great quarterback, not in the first round, not in the second or third round, but on day 3. And then keep looking for a quarterback every year until you find one. And if you find one, if he's better than Brock, you trade Brock. If he's not as good as Brock, you trade him. You keep building.
College and pro are the same. They always said, like, I don't know who the coach was Nick Saban or whatever, said, I sign a quarterback every year. Same thing in a pro. Get somebody in. The thing's a turnstile, and you never know who's going to stick. So,
yeah. No, I think the guy you're talking about is Max Brosmer from University of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And he's a 6'2", 225-pound senior having a pretty good year for the Golden Gophers.
Yeah.
And, they won that bowl game over Vatek. Yeah, I mean, this is a good time. I'll tell you, the other guy that I kind of like as a day 3 quarterback is I like the Notre Dame kid, Riley Leonard.
Oh, hell yeah.
He's 6'4", he's 220, he's super athletic, he's fast. He doesn't have a big arm. He's kind of like more of like a Brock Purdy type arm, right? He's just a mediocre arm, but he's a winner. That kid makes a lot of plays.
To your point, okay, now that's a good example. I love Riley Leonard. You were talking about a veteran guy you bring in. Okay, in Kyle Shanahan's system, you don't want a Jameis Winston.
I mean, you just want anybody who can process and get the ball out. But I just think for me, and this is just my preferences, I just think if you look at the trend of where NFL defenses are and where it seems like this whole thing's going, it seems like every year that goes by, mobility becomes like, hey, once upon a time it was like, hey, this guy's got mobility. That's kind of unique. Then it was like, hey, I kind of like mobility. Now I think we're at a point where the defenses are so fast, so athletic, that mobility is a absolute prerequisite. You got to have mobility. Yeah. You can't be Dan Marino. You can't be a statue. I mean, look at even guys like Mac Jones. Mac Jones is smart. He can process, but you know what? He's totally marginal because there's no mobility at all. So
Drake May was a good balanced guy. He had the ability to work in the system, and then he's got both. I don't want to bogart all your time. Last couple thoughts. I think Shanahan benefited from multiple years of having some genius defensive coordinators, i.e. their Shala and D'Amico Ryans, that saved his bacon there, kept us, and maybe this year that's where the big drop-off was. Had some big highlights of Pearsall coming out late, and then Jennings is going to be amazing. But yeah, they just got to work on that defense again. They need
more. They just need more. You look around at those top tier teams in football. They're all a little bit more talented than the Niners are right now.
Well, they had the depth. They were lacking in depth on that defense. They didn't have that second tier guy to step in.
No doubt. Pete,
Right.
thanks for the call, man. Have a great night.
You too.
Appreciate the call, and opens up a line at 808 KNBR. One angle that I think is interesting is, should the Niners maybe have Clay Kubiak calling plays? Last night they rolled up 436 total yards with Clay Kubiak calling the plays. Shanahan has turned over the play calling duties to Kubiak. Shanahan's called every single play. Since he took over, he's called every single play in every game that he's coached. And that's kind of what makes him valuable, is that he's such a good play caller, play sequencer. But what it comes down to is, after a while, your opponent starts to scout not just your players, but you. So they know how you're going to react in all these situations. And I think after a while, once you've been in the league for a long time, you've got a catalog of reactions to so many different things that you start to become predictable. And you can do all the self-scouting you want to kind of figure out where you're at, but your trends are your trends. What you like, you like. And maybe it would be a good time to, go with a Clay Kubiak, just because maybe opposing defensive coordinators are really clued in to Kyle Shanahan's likes and dislikes and his tendencies. And maybe that would throw defenses off their scent a little bit. Their defense, they regressed this year because their line wasn't great and they lost their weapons. But it did seem like everybody was reading their mail. I'm not saying that people were stealing signs, but maybe it's time to reinvent themselves a little bit on that side of the football. And maybe having a different play caller on game day might be it. You could still have Shanahan devising the plays. It's still his offense. He could still even be sequencing the plays. He could still, have his scripted plays at the beginning of the game. But maybe go with somebody else that they don't have so thoroughly scouted as far as how they'll react to certain coverages and certain defensive wrinkles. It's just an idea, but I was impressed by Clay Kubiak, and his daddy is a tremendous football coach. Gary was a tremendous coach, and I think the sons don't fall too far from the tree. All right. Appreciate the phone call. Opens up a line. Let's take one more before the break. Seth's in Rockland on KNBR. Hey, Seth.
Hey, great points. I kind of want to echo a little bit of what the last caller said, with a couple exceptions. I do agree with you 100% about Brock Purdy. 3 years, $45 million guaranteed per year sounds pretty much ideal if he would accept that, or maybe even a little bit less. And, we can't really use Baker as the benchmark now because he's thrown, 39 touchdowns. So, $30 million is probably not going to do it. But, I think
Brock's been to a Super Bowl. Brock's been to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I think there's got to be some respect given there for just that accomplishment right there.
Yeah, he definitely, he stepped in like the worst possible situation and really saved the entire organization. So, he's definitely due a good contract. But, Brock Purdy is a play-action quarterback, and I think that what happened this year, along with additional pressure that he put on himself, was we didn't have a consistent run game. So, a lot of those throws where he was, layering it over the top of the linebacker, where the linebackers were frozen for the run, or, he was really good against the blitz, but again, there was no threat of the run this year. So I think that I really believe that Kyle's always wanted a pass-first quarterback, and he's tried to prove that he's got a quarterback that can do that, with the exception of Trey Lance. But with Jimmy, he wanted to put more on Jimmy's plate. I think it was in 2020, and, we saw how that season started out. And then I really feel with Brock, Kyle's been testing him, and he's put more on his plate, especially in the second half of these games. And it was a little bit of a test, I feel like, to see if he could handle that. And I don't really feel like he passed that test. So he's a quarterback that I agree with you. He's not elite, but he's probably in the next tier where he's maybe 8 to 12 range. He can make really good decisions. He can make plays, but he's not a guy that you want making. He's not the playmaker you want on the team. He's not like Burrow where you can just, drop him back play after play. I wouldn't even say he's like Jaden Daniels where they put all sorts of pressure on that kid's plate and he's performed. But he's going to need the pieces around him. He can spread the ball around when he's got a good run game behind him. And I think also, when you're talking about big arm quarterbacks, I don't think that would ever work in Kyle's system, because if you look at what those type of quarterbacks excel at, they're big guys that are athletic. They've got a gun. They can throw a deep out. They can throw a deep ball. They can throw a deep dig. And they need a prototypical number one receiver that's a big body, that can run a 4-4, that can beat coverage. And the 49ers haven't really developed their personnel that way. They've got a bunch of versatile guys.
Something tells me if the Niners had Josh Allen, they'd figure it out.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Something tells me if they had Mahomes, they would find the right receiver. But I hear what you're saying. But to me, this season has been almost like multiple seasons. The Niners going into the bye week, they were looking good. They were 4-4. They were getting Christian McCaffrey back. Everything looked pretty good. But then McCaffrey came back. He played 3 games, and they just fell apart. I mean, after the bye, they stopped scoring. They went from scoring, 30 a game to scoring 19 a game. That's 23rd in the NFL. Since the bye week, the defense fell apart. They're giving up 28 a game. That's 30th in the NFL. They stopped taking the ball away, and their turnover margin was minus 14 since the bye week. That's 31st in the NFL. And that's it right there. You give up a lot of points. You don't score a lot of points. You turn it over a ton, and suddenly you don't win. And their win percentage since the bye week is 28th in the NFL. So, I mean, we all kind of thought there was more coming. In reality, this was a bad vibe all the way from July in training camp. They only beat one good team all year. It was the Buccaneers, who didn't have Godwin or Evans. So it's just not a vintage 49er team. They weren't nearly deep enough. All those misses, they missed 20 times in this regime in the first 3 rounds. It came home to roost. They held it off for a while by doing good in trades. Amazing Trent Williams trade, amazing CMC trade, amazing day 3 drafting. But this year caught up to them. And eventually you got a hit in rounds 1, 2, and 3, and they haven't. And while that's gone on, Detroit has hit incredibly. And now they're looking like suddenly the Lions look like the Niners, and the Niners look like the Lions. And it's kind of sad, but that's where we're at. Anyway, hey, let's take a time out. We're going to come back with a few more thoughts and a few more of your calls. People lined up. Lines all lit. 808 KNBR is the number. It's Niners Nightly on a Monday on the Sports Leader.
Now, from the O'Donnell Financial Group Sports Desk. Learn more at odfigroup.com. O'Donnell Financial Group, because planning is a process, not a product.
The Niners season is over. With their loss to the Cardinals, that is the end of the line for the Niners. And all the boys were talking at their lockers today in locker cleanup day, including quarterback Brock Purdy, who is talking about his contract situation and how he wants to avoid a possible holdout. You can find that clip and more on KNBR.com, KNBR socials, and the all-new KNBR app.
This is where you get your faithful fix. Niners Nightly with Larry Krueger keeps rolling on KNBR, the sports leader.
Things rolling on Niners Nightly on this Monday. Hope everybody's having a great start to their 2025. I was just talking to Jacob Violante, our producer, at the break. Some years I get my ass kicked in wagering, but not this year. I have absolutely been dominating. And so I'm just going to give you my winners for Wildcard Weekend. And I don't know about the spreads. I don't know. The spreads are tough because some of these spreads are, I usually I'll go money line parlay quite a bit if I don't want to mess around with the spread. I'll only go with the spread if I just really feel good about it. But this weekend, the winners, Bills over Broncos, Chargers are going to beat the Texans in Houston. Ravens are going to beat the Steelers in Baltimore in the AFC. Those are the 3 AFC games. The Vikings are going to beat the Rams in LA. The Eagles are going to beat the Packers in Philly. The only game that I just don't really have a great handle on is that Commanders-Buccaneers game in Tampa. I lean with the Commanders. I think they've got more magic going on than the Bucs. But if you told me that Baker and Evans and the Bucs, Todd Bowles somehow confuses the rookie in his first playoff game, I could see the Bucs maybe pulling the upset. The Commanders are getting 3. Bucs are a field goal favorite. But if I had to say my winners, give me Bills, Chargers, Ravens, Eagles, Vikings, and I don't know. I don't know about Commanders and Bucs. I'll have to beg out on that one. And I've been rolling in the college game as well. Go with Notre Dame and Ohio State. Notre Dame and Ohio State over Penn State and Texas Thursday and Friday. All right, let's go back to the phone lines. Nick's in San Mateo on the Sports Leader. Let's talk about the bright spot of the 49ers season. Hey, Nick, you're on the Sports Leader.
Hey, I just wanted to give you my just real quick summation of the year, and then talk about the bright spot. 3 words: lack of leadership, and it's prevalent all over the place. From you mentioned Kyle. I do think people have figured him out. How many times can we watch him pound his clipboard and make his angry face? I love Kyle, but he's getting outsmarted, and as the play caller, it's really evident when you have 20 yards to work with inside the red zone. Complete bust. And I know all the players we didn't have, and I know all that, but it just seems like it's the same cadence.
They can't They can't run when they need it. When they have to have a yard, they can't get it. When they would need to pass, and everybody knows they need to pass, they cannot pass.
Right.
When was the last time you saw the 49ers finish off a game on offense?
Right. Yeah.
They can't do it. They cannot finish.
They can't, and they didn't do it in the Super Bowl. They didn't do it most of the games. And even when they were 4-4 this year, it was a shaky 4-4.
You're right.
At that time, I thought it might be 10-7. People were saying, "Oh, they're going to, win out and be 13-4 or whatever." But so lack of leadership, not only there, but think about the receiving core. Who's the leader? I mean, Kittle does as much as he can, but Debo's an inverse leader. He's actually a cancer out there. And not a
I don't know if he's a cancer,
leader.
but don't put your hands on the long snapper and stop calling people.
Exactly.
Stop calling people out when you live in a glass house.
Right. And Ayuk didn't do himself a solid by holding out so long. He was a total disaster. So that
was a disaster. I'm going to wear red shorts to practice because I'm an individual. I mean, what the hell was that?
Right. Yeah. And so what leaders do is they tell people to fall in line. You got to fall in line. And so that it starts at the top. And I know Lynch is ranting and raving on the sideline, but again, it starts at the top. And then, on the defensive side, we talked about the defensive coordinators and all that. No leadership there. And then special teams. I mean, when's the last time we ran back a kickoff return or a punt return, or maybe we had one, but most of the time it's 3 yards and a cloud of dust, or maybe even a fumble. So
it's every single special teams play is negative. They're either a penalty, a turnover. Yesterday was a fake punt that they caught him by surprise. Why would you be caught by a surprise? The Arizona has done this to you before.
Right. So I don't mean to sound like a downer, because I'm a big Niners fan, but I call it the way I see it. And then lastly, on Brock Purdy, I agree with some of what you said, and the other callers. It's like the eyeball test this year, and I know he was missing a lot of people, but I saw him throwing a lot into the defensive lineman's hands. He didn't have he did a lot of good scrambling, but sometimes I saw him back there looking like, I mean, I hate to say it, but he looked a little bit like Garoppolo throwing into the defensive line and making some strange plays that he didn't really make last year. So I don't know if it was the arm injury from the end of last year. I don't think it was, but and of course, not having the weapons, I totally get it. I never called him assistant quarterback. I always hated that. I thought he did really well last year, but you got to be careful about just doling out endless money to him. You got to be disciplined. And if the stakes get too high, we need to fill in a lot of places on offensive line and defensive line. So they got to be careful. And so that's my take. The bright spot, I think the bright spot is what's going to happen in the off season. I think there's going to be some changes made at the leadership level, starting with coaches. I hope that's the case. Because
I get the sense that we're going to hear about that in the next 48 hours. I get the sense that before the end of the week, we're going to have something to really sink our teeth into. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
Nick, appreciate the call, man.
Yep. Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for the call. Opens up a line at 808 KNBR. Moving Man in Santa Clara on KNBR.
Yeah, hi, Larry. Thanks for taking my call.
Absolutely.
I agree with several of your comments tonight, and we're in a lot of trouble. You know better than most of the callers that just how severe our injuries are. Before I comment on Purdy, it's my understanding that you were a scout, and if so, when a team sends out, I don't know who's scouting these college kids right now.
The Niners, every team's got an army of scouts. They got their regional guys, and they got their cross-checkers, and then they got their, guys in front of them. And then there's a director of college scouting, a director of pro scouting, and they usually report to a director of player personnel or a general manager.
So
that's the general structure.
There's got to be a number one scout, and does he say, okay, he goes to Notre Dame and he says, okay, I want, scouting the quarterback, say the defense possibly only. They don't send somebody out there just to, don't they specifically tell them that they got 5 players in mind who they want to scout and go from there?
Well, every team's a little different how they break it down. Usually teams break it down by region. You have the West region, you have the Southwest, you have the Southeast. And if in some of the bigger regions where, like the Southeast, where there's lots and lots of schools, you might have multiple guys. But generally you have a region that you're responsible for, like all the schools in this region. And then you'll stop on campus and you'll go to the games, and then you'll start honing in on who the draft eligible players are. Obviously the seniors, but now you look at juniors as well, and you get a handle. Some teams will run a second guy through there, so they have 2 different opinions on every player in the country before they even get into their draft meetings. But it kind of does vary team to team and director to director as far as what their preferences are.
Okay. So one comment on Purdy, and for what it's worth, I heard your picks. I agree with all of them, except I think the Rams are going to win outright against Minnesota. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be something? Goodbye, Sam Darnold?
Yep, I think so. But anyway, that's just my opinion. So regarding Purdy, what you said earlier about the $45 million, Purdy does deserve a big contract. I mean, he's given all of the 49er fans, including myself, big thrills, and he was almost there. The first, it's 4 years now, when the Niners had 7 minutes left, they were ahead of Kansas City the whole game. There's no way we should have lost that game, and to this day I don't understand why Shanahan didn't run the ball the last 7 minutes and just burn out the clock. we had another Super Bowl right there.
Or forget run the ball in the last 7 minutes. How about just run the ball on 3rd and 4? And then with the plan being you're going to run it on 4th down. I mean, I think one thing Kyle does.
Do that? Why didn't they do that then?
Well, because Kyle, that's kind of more of the analytics approach. That's the the Sirianni Eagles who they get to 3rd and 4 and they run the ball. Part of the problem, and one of the major problems the Niners have, and this would be on my list of absolutely one of the first or second things that I would tackle.
Okay.
The Niners don't run the ball in the low red zone. If you can't run, they had a game 2 weeks ago. They had 2nd and goal from the 4. They passed it. On 3rd and goal from the 4, they passed it. And on 4th and goal from the 4, they kicked a field goal. It's like that is where you run the ball. You have to run the ball inside the 5-yard line. And they don't believe in their center, and they don't believe in their backs. There's no other way to say it. Otherwise, Shanahan, I believe, is kind of coaching around some of the weaknesses on his roster. And it's gotten to a point now where, they don't run the ball. I mean, why have you have a Pro Bowl fullback? You're one of 5 teams in the NFL that even carry a fullback. Your fullback is a Pro Bowler, and you cannot run in short yardage. Make that make sense.
Everything about Purdy, as you said earlier. Well, there's one weakness he has, and it's certainly not as he could do something about it. There are too many balls are being batted down simply because of his height. However, you can still get over that. He's got to be more aware of that. He should be able to avoid that. That's my point. I think personally myself, I think he's in the top 10 of all the quarterbacks right now. But nobody's out there number one. They all make mistakes simply because you said it earlier. I mean, the linebackers are bigger, powerful, faster. In some of these games, even Joe Montana, he would have had a problem. And I'll take Joe Montana over any quarterback since the 80s to the present right now that I've seen personally at the games. He just was one of the best. But
wait. We're talking about Joe Montana. This is San Francisco. This is KNBR. He's not one of the best. He was the best.
Okay.
He's the original. And I'll debate a lot of things, but that's not one of them. Joe was the best. He was the original. That's like saying that LeBron or Kobe is as good as Jordan. No. Jordan was the original. Those guys were copies. Tom is great. He's had an incredible career, but he watched Joe. And Joe was the original. But hey, moving man, let me jump. I got one last one before we hand it to Kerry Crowley. Is it Jan or Jan in Mountain View? We'll finish there on the Sports Leader, and then Kerry can take whoever's left on the line. Is it Jan? You're on the Sports Leader.
Yes, Larry. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I was just going to emphasize what you brought up, and that was that Shanahan needs to perhaps get a good offensive coordinator to assist him on the sidelines, because if you noticed the game last night between Detroit and Minnesota, Ben Johnson is out there making the calls, but what's his name? Campbell.
Dan Campbell.
He's over there. Yeah, Campbell is relaxed. He's not stressed, and they coordinate between each other. It's not that Shanahan won't be able to make the calls. The point is that the offensive coordinator could bring him some new looks, some things to disguise
Jen,
offense.
Jen, I think what it really comes down to is just that right now, opposing defenses know that Kyle Shanahan's the play caller, and they know what his tendencies are. And so, you can fight tendencies. We used to have meetings all the time where the head coach would want to meet with me and say, all right, give me our breakdown. Tell me our tendencies. So every week he wanted to know, what are our tendencies, so that we could work against our tendencies and always have an idea of how the opposing team scouted us and what they thought when they scouted us. Well, it's the same kind of thing. If teams are, I mean, Shanahan is a better play caller than Kubiak. I'm not debating. I'm not saying, oh, Kubiak's better. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying after a number of years in the league, defensive coordinators have a book on Shanahan's tendencies, what he likes, what he doesn't like. They don't have that book on Kubiak. So all I'm saying is, how about a situation where, you know, you got a guy right there who can call plays, and how about you don't tell everybody who's calling plays, and maybe you use Kubiak some games, maybe you use him for a half, maybe you use him for a quarter, but just to throw opposing defenses off your scent is kind of my thought process.
Disguise the offense, because the whole NFL is caught up to Shanahan, and he just continues. I almost think that he just brings out the same play sheet, maybe makes a couple of and another thing is that he needs to make adjustments during halftime. I don't see where he really makes adjustments to fit what's going on in the field.
Oh, Jan, I would guarantee you that he makes adjustments. You don't. Maybe they're not readily apparent to you. Maybe you're not noticing them. But these guys absolutely make adjustments. They're looking at that's why he's looking at that tablet. You know, that's why he's looking down at that thing. That's why they're looking at still pictures. They do make adjustments. That's not his issue. But to me, if you said what's the primary issue, both sides of the ball and special teams, all three areas, the Niners, they've missed on too many picks. They've left too much on the bone, too much meat on the bone on draft day, and they just have to hit at a higher clip. It's as simple as that. You can miss. Nobody hits all your picks. Come on, there's a failure rate, but you can't miss 12 times in the first 3 rounds over 3 consecutive drafts and not feel the impact of that. And that's what's happened, and that's why they're at where they're at. And if you want to know conversely, look at the Lions. Look what they have done in those same drafts. The same drafts where the 49ers are struggling to land guys in the first 3 rounds, the Lions have built up their entire roster all on those picks over the last 3 drafts. So it's been an amazing thing that Brad Holmes has done. And don't think for a second that John Dorsey, as a draft consultant, did not help the Lions. It absolutely did, and it helped the Chiefs before the Lions. And that's the kind of piece that I would, if I was Jed York wants to win. And I think Jed York would spend $250,000 to hire a John Dorsey, to have him be a draft consultant, to just have another set of eyes who's done it before. And when suddenly, you know what, John Dorsey showed up in Detroit, and all of a sudden here's Brian Branch, here's Aiden Hutchinson, here's, you name it. I mean, Kirby Joseph, Amon-Ra. I mean, they start hitting and hitting and hitting, and they're not just getting a player, they're getting stars. And so I think that's another one of my ideas to make the situation a little bit more uncomfortable. Bring in a draft consultant. Yeah. Will somebody be insulted by it? Sure. But you know what? If you're all about winning, then you should be fine with getting the best results on draft day, no matter who gets credit for those picks. It really doesn't matter. Guess what? Everybody in the organization gets a ring when you win a Super Bowl. It doesn't matter if it's your call or somebody else's call. Just get it right. All right, that's going to do it for us. Fast hour. Sorry to Kerry that we ate in 15 minutes on his show. Up next is Kerry Crowley. If you're still holding the line, he will take more of your phone calls. The Niners are definitely a big topic tonight. I'm back with you tomorrow night at 6, and we'll see you then. Thanks to Jacob Violante. Thanks to all of you guys. We'll see you tomorrow at 6 on The Sports Leader.
KNBR and KNBR FM, your home of San Francisco 49ers football.
We are back. What's going on, folks? Kerry Crowley hanging out with you 7 until 9. Sports Phone KNBR. Got a lot to discuss this evening. I want to talk 49ers superlatives. Best players, worst players, best game, worst game. Recapping the season tonight because we're going to spend so much of this offseason looking ahead to the future. I'll be honest, there's not a whole lot that any of us want to relive from a 6-11 season. Anyone who watched yesterday's game in its entirety, there's not a whole lot to say when you get blown out by a division opponent in a game that doesn't matter when your starting quarterback is sitting. So we'll do our best. We'll file through what happened this season. We'll talk about some changes that need to be made. And we'll look ahead to Wildcard Weekend in the NFL. There's also a Jonathan Kaminga Golden State Warriors storyline that I want to touch on with regard to his injury, how it impacts the Warriors trade deadline, outlook. And later this week, we'll do our Giants hot stove. It's back after the holiday. So tonight, it's all about the 49ers. Tonight, it's all about you, your takes, your thoughts on what needs to change for this franchise. I sat here today thinking about everything that went wrong for the 49ers after the Super Bowl loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I honestly think I could do an entire 3 or 4 hour show just as a timeline of the moment that Dre Greenlaw's Achilles snapped to the moment that this 2024 regular season ended on Sunday in Glendale. And we could go through all the calamities, all the catastrophes, all the terrible things that happened to this franchise. But who would that serve? How would that help? I say on this show that we often like to celebrate the biggest wins together and mourn the biggest losses. Well, after a 6-11 season, I think we all just want to move on. Because, in all honesty, every week this season, it's felt like some sort of an autopsy has been performed on the San Francisco 49ers. We've all tried to get to the bottom of the biggest issues. So tonight, let's move forward. Tonight, let's talk about the future. Tonight, let's talk about what you would like to see change with the San Francisco 49ers. If you want to go big and bold, please be my guest. Go big and bold. I'll defend my thoughts that I think Kyle Shanahan should remain as the 49ers head coach, and he will. I think that Brock Purdy should be the quarterback of the future for this franchise, and I do believe that they will get a deal done early this offseason. Then again, I thought that Trent Williams would be in training camp. Didn't happen. I wasn't expecting a Christian McCaffrey extension last offseason. It did happen. So not everything I say, not every tidbit of analysis I give here is correct. But I do think there's some thoughts that I have on what needs to change that most of you out there will agree with. I think the 49ers need to dramatically rethink their defensive approach. And it starts at the top. New coordinator, potentially a new scheme. I've seen a lot of this 4-3 Seahawks style of defense that Kyle Shanahan has used throughout his tenure in San Francisco, and I think the 49ers have become all too predictable, going coordinator to coordinator, just shuffling the deck and not changing enough of what they do on the defensive side of the ball, how they deploy their personnel on the defensive side of the ball. I think that Kyle needs to bring in a red zone specialist this offseason, an assistant on the coaching staff who either takes over red zone play calling or redesigns red zone play calling. I think that's imperative even if Christian McCaffrey's at full strength. 49ers were not good enough in the red zone this season. I think the 49ers need to clean house on special teams. New special teams coordinator, new punter, new kicker, new coverage units, new specialists, all of the above. If you have some thoughts on what you'd like to see change for the San Francisco 49ers, please do dial in. Please do give me a call. And please do text. Tonight's the night. Let's get those thoughts out. 415-808-KNBR is the number. Your thoughts on 49ers changes, the first moves that need to be made this offseason when we come back. You're listening. Sports Zone KNBR. Kerry Crowley rolling with you until 9 o'clock here on KNBR 104.5, 680, the Sports Leader.
This is where we feed the faithful. Sports Phone, KNBR. Streaming live at twitch.tv/the Sports Leader.
Here's Dobbs with a boot roll now. Going to throw back left, and he throws deep. Wide open! Kyle Juszczyk diving for the end zone! Touchdown! Juice!
It's about time. Feed 44, and we've seen this play so many times this year with Juice wide open, and they have thrown it to him a couple of times, but not often enough.
Wow.
And a lot of defenses just forget to cover him.
Well, if you told me way back in August that Week 18 would feature Josh Dobbs throwing touchdown passes to Kyle Juszczyk, I'd have guessed the 49ers would have gone about 6-11. Yeah, not something we had on our bingo cards because we didn't expect this season to unfold the way it did. A huge disappointment, and Sunday was just the icing on the cake as the 49ers were blown out by a divisional opponent, which means they finished this season, 2-4, 1-5 against the NFC West? All I know is they were terrible against division opponents, and that is what cost them this season. That means when you enter the offseason, the 49ers did today, it is time to consider big changes. It's time to consider shakeups. Do they need a different head coach? I don't think so. Do they need a new general manager? I don't think so. A new quarterback? Not on my mind right now. But there's a lot that this team can change, so we head out to the phone lines. 415-808-KNBR is the number. Let's go to Rob in San Mateo. My man Rob in San Mateo, you're on KNBR. Rob, how's it going this evening?
Hey, Kerry, how you doing tonight, man?
Oh, doing well. Always love hearing your voice. What's on your mind tonight?
Just calling because I agree with you. You know, I don't think Kyle's going anywhere. I don't think he should go anywhere because my thing is, if for some crazy reason, let's say the Niners decide to move on from Shanahan, which I don't think they will, but who would they hire instead? Yeah. I feel like half of the coaches in the league right now are running a Shanahan system from when, most of them were all back with the Commanders, you know? And so I don't think we would probably get a lesser version of what we have right now if Shanahan left. But I don't think he's leaving.
I think most fans would tell you that there's two schools of thought to the eventual next head coach of the 49ers. Because, look, Kyle Shanahan's not going to be in San Francisco forever, but I at least want to see him in 2025. And those schools of thought are you bring in an offensive innovator, and the leading offensive innovator out there is Ben Johnson right now. Or two, you bring in a leader of men, someone who has played in the NFL. He can inspire people like a Dan Campbell type, and that is Mike Vrabel. And I don't see either of those coaches who will land openings this offseason being on the radar in the next few years because, one, like you said, the 49ers aren't moving on from Kyle Shanahan. And two, I think they have both had the opportunity to assess potential openings, the jobs that have come open over the last 24 hours. They kind of know where they're going to be. They know those landing spots. They know that their situations have been narrowed down. So I don't see a coach out there where it would be worth the 49ers moving on from Shanahan. It just doesn't make sense to me, hasn't made sense to me, Rob, and I don't think it will make sense to me unless the 49ers finish under 500 next season.
Yeah, no, it hasn't made sense to me all season. People saying, that stuff online. But this offseason, what they really need to focus on is defense. Yeah. Just defense all around, from the line to the safeties, because Bosa needs some help on the end, and we also need another big guy in the middle, preferably two. Mooney Ward, I don't know if you heard his comments today, but man, they broke my heart.
I did, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he's got to do what's best for him. I don't think any Niners fan is going to have any ill will towards Mooney Ward.
We all certainly wish him the best. I mean, he went through some seriously traumatic situations, and I think we all just want him to be happy and his family to be healthy, Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, but from a football standpoint, he's another guy that we're going to have to replace. You got Malik Mustafa, who I think, not Mustafa, but
Hufanga becoming a free agent.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want him to be a free agent for someone else. And I don't think he will. I think they'll probably get it done. But, I mean, our defense and special teams needs work.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more with that, Rob. Thank you for the call. I appreciate that because I do believe our next caller wants to talk defense and kind of the shakeup that the 49ers need on that side of the ball. Let's go out to Alex in East Palo Alto. Alex in East Palo Alto, you're on Sports Phone. Alex, how's it going this evening?
I'm doing fantastic. Anytime I get to talk to you, Kerry, it is wonderful. I really do think, though, that the Niners defense and the wide nine that they found so much success with, I think it's hit the limit of it being as effective, and that might be personnel based as well, but I would love to hear if you think as well. Like, I feel as if there needs to be some type of tweak, not just to the personnel, but even to the scheme defensively.
Yeah, I'm in favor of a schematic twist on what the 49ers are doing right now. And look, for anyone who's not fully aware, look, the wide nine is just having a pure pass rusher on the edge and someone who in the 4-3 defense is really more of like that 3-4 outside linebacker who can go and line up out wide and just get after the quarterback. And the 49ers, to me, Alex, have just... I don't want to say like they've exhausted their scheme because I think that you can be a great defensive coordinator and have the same scheme for years and constantly evolve, as we saw with Bill Belichick in New England for years, and we saw this with Nick Saban at the college level and how he always had Alabama's defense ready to play. I just think that this is a defense that is very limited in terms of the linemen that it has at its disposal right now. And unless they go and they add a bunch of linemen in the draft, I wonder if the more efficient way to making this defense better in the future is transitioning to somewhat in between of a 3-4 or looking at different ways you can deploy your defensive linemen up front and using more, four-man fronts with heavier fronts and the way that the 49ers go about things. I just think that they became too predictable this year, and I think that they need a serious shakeup in terms of their scheme.
I mean, I even would wonder if a 3-3-5, everybody has to kind of stay based in nickel defense and get the extra defensive back because of so many receivers. Is there a path where the Niners maybe just permanently plan to be that way? They've got good defensive backs. I could see that being an option. You would need to basically outlay a ton of your money into just top-of-the-level defensive tackles at that point because you're only playing one. But at this point, it feels like everything has to be on the table, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, you don't see the 3-3-5 in the NFL as much because you have to be able to rush in the interior and the hash marks are closer together. And so you just have to be able to stop the run a lot more efficiently than you do against, some of those wide open Big 12 and ACC offenses where you see a bunch of 10 personnel and 5-man wide receiver groups as well. I think what you said, though, really, really strikes me as something that the 49ers need to hone in on, and that is one of the strengths of this team moving forward is going to be their young defensive back core that they've got. Lenore's locked up for a while. Leonardo Green was a successful draft pick. People want to see more Malik Mustafa. I think that they've got the depth in the secondary if, Jair Brown takes the next step to be creative back there and maybe, figure out ways that you can use those nickel and dime packages to bring someone from the secondary on blitzes, which we just haven't seen enough of through the years, whether it be Robert Saleh, D'Amico Ryans, or now Steve Wilkes and then Nick Sorensen this year. I want to see a team that is incredibly unpredictable next year on the defensive side of the ball. And to me, that will be the sign that Kyle Shanahan watched the tape this year and saw that other offenses had this defense snuffed out this year,
And I do feel like, too, the other piece to this, and it's kind of, a bit of a taboo question, but the whole idea behind wide nine working is basically that Nick Bosa would go on whichever side of the field he saw fit, and the rest of the D-line, really the other end, would adjust to whichever side Bosa wanted to rush. Bosa probably was playing pretty banged up from when he tweaked his injury against the Seahawks, but I got to feel as if even before that, he was not the type of player that was worthy of that level of scheme specialness there. Either he ascends back to that, and okay, the wide nine looks better when he's getting 12, 13, 15 sacks, or you maybe find somebody that's a little bit more of a traditional pair-up with him and have him stick to one side. That might make it easier in some ways for offenses, but it allows you to stunt and do more things. It just feels as if their defense, there's a personnel issue, and defense is all about adjusting to what the offense does to you. But I do wonder if they've been too predictable, as you're saying, and especially if you're, needing the best of the best at the linebacker position, at the edge position to help make this work. Well, the injury bug that hit them this year should prove that they probably need something that works a little bit better if you have to rely on your depth.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. Alex, thank you so much for the call. Appreciate your thoughts and your perspective tonight. We've got to take a quick break here. On the other side, more callers. 415-808-KNBR is the number. We'll lead things off with Dwayne from Stockton when we get back. Your thoughts on what the 49ers need to change this offseason here on KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
This is where we feed the faithful. Sports Phone, KNBR. Streaming live at twitch.tv/the Sports Leader.
All right, we're back here on Sports Phone, KNBR. Kerry Crowley rolling with you until 9 o'clock this evening. Talking about the different changes you want to see the 49ers make this offseason. Said at the top of the show, and it bears repeating, 49ers aren't firing their head coach, Kyle Shanahan, nor are they getting rid of their general manager, John Lynch, nor do I think they should have. There are teams that decided to keep things relatively stable. The Colts with Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard and Anthony Richardson. The Giants, Joe Schoen and Brian Dable are coming back. Those decisions didn't necessarily make sense to me. When you're the 49ers, I think you run it back at least one more year. Now, I think there's a lot of changes they need to make. We just talked with some of our recent callers about changes on the defensive side of the ball. I think the 49ers need complete overhaul on special teams. New coordinator, new kicker, new punter, new specialists on coverage. They just need to blow up the special teams and start from scratch. But what do you think? 415-808-KNBR is the number. Let's go out to our man, Dwayne in Stockton. Dwayne in Stockton, you're on Sports Phone. Dwayne, how's it going this evening?
Hey, what's up, though, brother? How you doing?
Oh, always doing well. What's on your mind tonight, Dwayne?
Well, I just still feel like 49ers not seeing the light, man. After
okay,
this
break it down for me. Break it down for me.
You need all three top spots. You need a new coach, you need a new defensive coordinator, and you need a new quarterback. If you don't handle it, you're just going to keep on losing, man. This is going to go on and on because it hasn't stopped yet from the Super Bowl hangover all the way to 47 points that the Arizona Cardinals hung on you.
You don't think that there's a reasonable path against the schedule that they play next season, which I got to admit, Dwayne, it's a weak schedule right now. You don't think there's a reasonable path to doing what the Philadelphia Eagles did this year, which was come back from a terrible stretch run, come back from some injuries that bit them, and all of a sudden be right back in the mix when you're sitting at home in January and you get that extra month to rest your legs? You don't think that's possible?
Not after a season like this. I've never seen a season like this. They need a complete overhaul. I say you bring Saleh back, let him be the head coach. That's a good start. You got to get Sorensen off the sideline because that's a bad look. Soft coach, soft defense. I don't even know what
I do think the defense was soft this year. I do think, yeah. I'll give you that.
What does Staley even look like? Does anybody even know what Staley looks like? What was his role anyway? Where was he? I just know what was going on. It was kind of a mess on defense. And then with Purdy, man, he's not going to ever be good again, bro.
Ever.
You better just realize that.
You're saying that about someone who's, 25 years old? He's not going to ever be good?
No, his physical, where he lacks physical ability, the NFL knows how to stop him now, bro. And they just run their best packages in the fourth quarter. And he starts going through.
I think I disagree with that. He took a step back this year. Absolutely. No question in my mind. He was much better in 2023. I don't think so, Dwayne. I don't think so. And look, I love when you call. I love the fiery takes, the passion that you bring, but I'm going to disagree with you on a lot of that stuff. What I will say is I think you're spot on defense. I think the 49ers need to change out their defensive coordinator. And look, if Robert Saleh would be willing to come back, that would be a great hire for Kyle Shanahan. So thank you for the call. Appreciate your thoughts there. 415-808-KNBR is the number. Let's go to Safe at Third in San Francisco. Safe at Third in San Francisco. You're on Sports Phone. How's it going this evening?
And it's going beautiful, man. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, always doing well, especially when we get to talk to you. Love your passion, love your 49ers energy. What's on your mind tonight?
Hey, like I always start off, I'm a 49er faithful since 1953. What the Niners need is defense. Like a lot of the callers are saying, I respect all the callers. I love what they're saying in a lot of ways. They need defense. You need two bookends. To go along, help out with Bosa. Bosa's, he's getting a little beat up there, so he needs some help. You need two bookends. You need a linebacker that's going to be there with the two we got. We don't know what Dre has for us yet. We will find that out next season. But you need to get a couple of linebackers to fill in and get that. I think our defensive backs are good.
Yeah.
So if you have your line is good and doing their job, it makes the defensive backs have an easier job. I'm willing to wait a little bit when it comes down to the offense. We can get some offensive plugins. I have no problem with that. Look like Ricky Pearsall is going to be the person we all thought he would be. And for people who are talking about getting rid of the coach and the general manager, fire him today, and the Bears will be there tomorrow to pick him up. Let me tell you. I'm telling you. And with that, you have a great show, Kerry.
I always appreciate that, Safe at Third. Very good commentary, and I totally agree with that. I think, look, if somehow, some way, the 49ers tomorrow were to say Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy were both available and you could trade for both the coach and the quarterback, I think there'd be a lot of people who'd be lining up to trade for Kyle Shanahan to get him in the door as their head coach. I think that there would be more limitations on who you could find for Brock Purdy, and I wonder if that will factor into the way that the 49ers negotiate with Purdy, who was out there in front of his locker in Santa Clara today saying, hey, look, I want this to be a quick deal. I want to get this done, and I want to make sure that I'm in here on my new contract by the start of OTAs, which is music to the ears of 49ers fans who saw what happened last year with Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams. But also, I can't help but wonder if he was sending a message to the 49ers, hey, let's not drag this out. Let's get a deal done. Pay me a fair market value, and let's move forward. So I wonder what that fair market value is in the minds of the 49ers, and I wonder what it is in the mind of Brock Purdy and his agent. More thoughts on the 49ers when we come back. I'm Kerry Crowley. You're listening to Sports Zone KNBR here on KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
Sound off on the sports leader. Sports phone KNBR keeps rolling right here and on the all-new KNBR app.
All right, we're back here on Sports Phone KNBR. Kerry Crowley rolling with you until 9 o'clock this evening, almost halfway home. Going to mention some Golden State Warriors stuff in the 8 o'clock hour. Talk Jonathan Kaminga, how that impacts the Warriors trade deadline plans, how it should impact the Warriors trade deadline plans. Hand out some 49ers awards and also look ahead to Wildcard Weekend. But right now, it is all about you. It is all about our callers. 415-808-KNBR is the number. Got time for a few more. Let's kick things off with Brian in San Jose this segment. Brian in San Jose, you're on Sports Phone. Brian, how's it going this evening? Brian, we got you there?
Well, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you now. What's on your mind tonight, Brian?
Okay. Well, first, I mean, obviously, I think we need some new coordinators, special teams, and defense. Special teams is a disaster, absolute disaster. I don't think they had one positive special teams play all year. That Debo
certainly felt that way.
Yeah, that long Debo return was the only good one. Then it got called back on the penalty.
Yeah.
And so I think if we traded back maybe in the first round, got some extra mid-round draft picks, help fill out the special teams with like some quality players, then I think that would help us a lot. I think that's a big problem there. And then depth all around. We have top of the line players everywhere, but the number twos aren't that. And so I think we need some quality depth.
I
injuries
think
happen.
You're spot on right there. I mean, especially when you consider, next season, Brian, this is going to be an older roster. And I think that you really have to consider the fact that you can't count on health, which means that these draft picks, it's not the first and second round guys who are going to be playing an important role. They certainly will be in significant roles next year. They're going to need more Malik Mustafas, more Isaac Guerendos, more guys who are drafted in the 4th and 5th round who take off next year. You're spot on right there.
Yeah, and it seems like we draft better in the 5th round than the first round anyway.
I know. It's crazy. Hey, how about this? Just trade back and rack up those 4th and 5th round draft picks.
We'll just take the whole 5th round.
Figure it out from there. That's going to be the 49ers recipe for success. Brian, thank you for the call. Appreciate your thoughts. Good stuff. Let's go out to Mark in Fairfield. Mark in Fairfield, you're on Sports Phone. Mark, how's it going this evening?
Hey, man, it's all good. Thanks for taking my call. My first take, man, is that not too many fans will probably agree with me, but I'm sticking with Jake Moody. Why? Wow. This guy, for 4 years, man, he practiced his craft at Michigan, and he did well. And, the guy has the range. He has the experience. From what I understand, he has great practice habits. What it is, whatever's going on in his mind, game time, that's causing this dysfunction. I don't know if it's the injury he had last year or if it's in his head, but I'm still, not just because he was a 3rd-round pick, I'm still sticking with the guy because he's a specialist. Okay. He's a specialist, man, and he's got a skilled profession that his track record, minus his recent actions, tells me I'm gonna stick with this guy.
You're going with the college track record over the NFL track record. Okay. Didn't expect to hear that tonight, but hey, I respect it.
But let me give you this, man. I mean, if you're kicking a 50-yard field goal in college, or if you're kicking it in the NFL, what's the difference? You're in front of 100,000 fans either way, so that doesn't really move me with what he did in college, how it translates into the NFL. Okay. Again, like I said, he has a skilled position, and he's been good at it, man. Whatever he's gone on, just like some pitchers in baseball, they're on point for a little while throwing strikes, and then for a period of time they can't get the ball over the plate. So I don't know if it's mental or what. The second take I got is what the hell is guys like Tyreek Hill and DeAndre. Now, if you don't want to play for a team anymore, to me, like yesterday, Hill could have just said in the second quarter, he said to himself, hey, man, I don't want to be with this organization anymore. I'm just going to walk up to the coach and say, look, I pulled a hammy. I'm done for the day.
Yeah.
I'm not going to just quit on my team because, yeah, you're going to get your out. But what the next guys you play with, man, you're gonna have a shady reputation. This guy will bail out on you, man, in a New York minute. So I don't know what kind of advice those guys got, Campbell and Hill, but it was all bad, man. Thanks for taking my call.
You're right on that. Appreciate the thoughts on that. 415-808-KNBR is the number. When we come back, I've got some thoughts I want to share on the Golden State Warriors, the state of the trade market right now, and really some thoughts on Jonathan Kaminga and how his injury impacts the Warriors, and Joe Lacob, Mike Dunleavy's view at the deadline. I'm Kerry Crowley. You're listening to Sports Zone KNBR. We are rolling with you until 9 o'clock here on KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
It sound right, boy.
All right, we're back here on Sports Phone KNBR. Kerry Crowley rolling with you until 9 o'clock on the leader this evening. I said that we would keep things mostly focused on the San Francisco 49ers. And how many times throughout the month of January are we going to be able to say that? Because it's a 49ers team that won't be playing in Wildcard Weekend, obviously won't be around Divisional and Conference Championship Weekend. We can't look forward to a Super Bowl. It's just going to be a different sounding show over the month of January here on KNBR. I remember last year, Sports Phone, felt like I never touched the Warriors, didn't talk about the Giants who weren't making moves and weren't relevant until the month of March. This year, we're going to lean heavily on the Warriors. We're going to talk plenty of Giants off-season fodder. Anytime they make a move, we'll be discussing it here on KNBR in great detail. We're going to have to spend loads of time getting acquainted with NFL draft analysts. I have a feeling that we're going to have a few guests on this year to just break down the different options in the first round. And I mean, for years we were talking about a 49ers team that was picking at or near the back end of the first round or didn't have a first round pick in the wake of the Trey Lance decision. Now, all of a sudden, we're talking about a 49ers team that they're going to have to hit first, second, third round draft picks. It is a huge, huge month of April coming up for this San Francisco 49ers team, and it will be here before you know it. In the meantime, we've got the Warriors leading into the trade deadline, no Jonathan Kaminga. We've got the San Francisco Giants with some hot stove action. We'll see if Buster Posey can continue adding to this Giants lineup, which they've got Willie Adames, but they certainly need more help if they want to keep up with the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Diamondbacks in the National League West. So, reminder that Sports Phone KNBR is presented by Industrial Metal Supply online at industrialmetalsupply.com. It's metal made easy. One of the things that I wanted to do real quick, we're going to get into some bigger segments tonight. I'm going to talk 49ers football and hand out some superlatives, some awards for a 6-11 season. Yes, those exist, at least Sports Phone KNBR is handing them out, and then we'll preview the Wildcard Weekend matchups across the NFL, as this will be the last show I can talk football this week. Later on this week, I'll have Giants Hot Stove, where at least I know that Pat Burrell will be joining me to break down the state of the Giants lineup and what he learned in year one as a hitting coach for this franchise. But before we turn things fully over to football, I did just want to talk a little bit about the Jonathan Kaminga injury and the significance of a player on the rise, a player playing the best basketball of his career, missing 11 games. And that's at bare minimum for the Golden State Warriors right now. A team that has been caught in the middle for so much of this season, and really caught in the middle ever since they won that fourth title in 8 seasons. I know that the two timelines plan has been out the window for a while, but a part of me has still believed that Joe Lacob, in watching Jonathan Kaminga develop and show those flashes of brilliance that he has, particularly over the last several weeks, part of me still believes that he thinks that Kaminga can be the guy. That, yeah, it won't be a Steph-like ceiling, but you're hanging on to this 22-year-old kid because he's got such a bright future ahead of him. And if you were to trade Kaminga, if you were to give him up, maybe it ends up being like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander trade. And I think that's an extreme where the Clippers gave him up to the Oklahoma City Thunder and he morphs into one of the 3 best players in the NBA. But I think that so many owners and so many general managers, so many executives across all of sports, this isn't just true of the NBA, they hold on to players for too long because they fear that they'll look bad in the long run. They fear decisions that will impact their future 5 years from now or 7 years from now, instead of maximizing the present when they still might look bad in the present and long run. So hang with me for a moment. Say the Warriors, independent of the Jonathan Kaminga injury, were just to make the decision that he's too valuable of an asset right now to give up. He's too important to their future to trade away. Well, anyone who's watched this Warriors team over the last 2-3 seasons, we know that this team isn't going anywhere. We know that it's playoffs, that it's play in or bust at the moment. And so when you've got Steph Curry, when you've got a generational talent, someone who's transformed your franchise, transcended basketball, and you find yourself in the mix for a play-in spot, hard to blame anyone who feels uninspired. And so while Kaminga may be important, and while other players, Trace Jackson-Davis and Moses Moody and so many of these young Warriors players, Pajemski, they might have bright futures in front of them. I think as an executive in Mike Dunleavy, as a coach in Steve Kerr, as an owner in Joe Lacob, you've got to consider the future in the future and focus on the present in the present. Jonathan Kaminga may one day be that dude. And so what if it's for the Brooklyn Nets? I think that you watch him develop, you see what's possible, and you know that it's not going to happen immediately. There's not a leap that Kaminga can make once he returns from this ankle injury to the end of this 2025 season to where the Warriors will suddenly be a top 3, top 4 seed in the West. I do think there are deals out there. There are trades to be made that would give the Warriors the opportunity to ascend in the West, to make a play-in run, to upset or shock a team in the playoffs, and to put Steph Curry on the stage that he belongs on. I don't think anyone inside the Chase Center building believes the Warriors are going to win a title this season. But I do believe that Steph deserves a big stage. And what we saw last year, what we saw the year before that, being bounced in the play-in, it's not a big enough stage. It's not good enough. It is not the type of basketball the Warriors should be playing. They need to be in a playoff series against a star-laden juggernaut, and they need to have their best opportunity to win that series. They may not win 3. They may not win a second-round series, but you need to give them the shot to do some damage. You need to give them a chance. And right now, with the current construction of this Warriors roster and the current inconsistencies that have existed for 2 seasons for Golden State, and the fact that ownership and management can't seem to come to a consensus on a direction, if it takes this long to come to a consensus, that should be your consensus. That the current state of affairs, the status quo, isn't good enough. And you owe it to the best players. You owe it to the transformational talents to go out there and pursue more. So while I don't think it's going to be a Jimmy Butler, and while the Warriors may devise a way to get better and hang on to Kaminga in the process, or hang on to Andrew Wiggins in the process, this is a team that right now at 18 and 17 is in clear need of a shakeup. Because you don't lose games like the one the Warriors lost on Sunday night, being blown out by 30 points against the Sacramento Kings, and come back and say that everything's fine. You don't look at a team that loses in blowout fashion to a squad that just fired its coach, one the Warriors know all too well, and say, you know what? Things will get dramatically better if we just stay the course. That would be doing a disservice to Steph Curry. That would be doing a disservice to Steve Kerr. That would be doing, more than anything, a disservice to Warriors fans. So I hope that Mike Dunleavy and Joe Lacob are emboldened. I hope that they take the chance, and I hope that they make things interesting. Because at a time when the 49ers are not in the playoffs, the Giants aren't making moves at the rate that we thought they might be when Buster Posey took over as president of baseball operations. Someone's got to spice things up around here. And I'll give the Golden State Warriors the best chance to do so, at least over the next month. I'm Kerry Crowley. When we come back, talking 49ers football here on The Leader. You're listening. KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
This is where we feed the faithful. Sports Phone, KNBR. Streaming live at twitch.tv/the Sports Leader.
All right, we're back here on Sports Phone KNBR. Kerry Crowley rolling with you until 9 o'clock this evening. Later on tonight, we'll look ahead to Wildcard Weekend in the NFL, do our picks for each of the 6 games that we've got. Always one of the best weekends of the football season. And Thursday night, we'll get a college football bowl game. Friday night, we'll get a college football bowl game as well. So looking forward to a full big weekend of high-powered football across colleges and the NFL. We are rolling into the month of January, and the only unfortunate component is that the 49ers are not a part of this. It is going to be a long offseason, a lot of nights spent talking about the first-round draft pick that the 49ers currently hold, discussing different options that they have and the different maneuvers that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan could take as they look ahead to the 2025 season. But while so much of the offseason will be spent looking ahead to the future, talking about the change that the 49ers must make, and, if you listened earlier today, hopefully very soon, a potential record-setting extension or just a potential extension for Brock Purdy at the quarterback position. I think the 49ers fans would be, I can't say that they would be happy about a record-setting deal, but I can say that most 49ers fans who I've spoken to on this show, seen on the text line, seen on the YouTube chat over the past few months, have agreed that getting a deal done and getting Brock Purdy locked up for the long term is in the best interest of the franchise. And every time I say that, someone pops on. 415-808-KNBR is our number on our Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line. Every time I say that, someone says the rest of the NFL doesn't value Brock Purdy the way that the 49ers do. They shouldn't pay him. Nevertheless, you listen today, I think he understands that it's in the best interest of him and his team to get an extension done soon. And so I think all of us, or most of us, I should say, we're never in 100% agreement here on this show, hope that that deal does get done. So with that, we will be looking back to the season that the 49ers just had, because I do want to hand out some superlative awards for this 49ers team. And when you're 6-11, there's not a whole lot to hang your hat on. This was a 4th place team, and it's a team that crumbled down the stretch. I think we all saw the toll that injuries took on this 49ers roster. We saw the 49ers play deep into January and early February last year in the Super Bowl. They just weren't able to turn the corner and recover the same way the Kansas City Chiefs did. Of course, the Chiefs revitalized by winning the Super Bowl for the 2nd season in a row. The 49ers demoralized by losing for the 2nd time in 5 years. But with that being said, there were a few bright spots, a few spots that I want to pick at that really stuck out as sore thumbs for the San Francisco 49ers, and we will do that right now. The first award to hand out is our offensive MVP this season. And I think, you go around to 49ers fans and ask anyone who their favorite person to watch on this team was this year, and 95% of people would say George Kittle. Offense, defense, Kittle was outstanding from the start. He's someone who probably, 5-6 times this year was listed as questionable for a game, just because he takes such a toll on Sundays when he shows up and blocks the line of scrimmage, when he's rolling down the field, yards after catch, yards after contact, and he just put in another sensational season. It will be his 6th Pro Bowl season, potentially his 3rd All-Pro season. We're talking about someone who at 31 years old is building a resume that is deserving or worthy of consideration for Canton, Ohio. That's how good George Kittle has been. The 4th time in his career that he went over 1,000 yards receiving, ultimately leads the 49ers this year with 1,106 yards, 78 receptions, 8 touchdowns. He's got 45 on his career now, and someone who's just a tone setter all year long for the San Francisco 49ers. And if I wasn't taking George Kittle as the offensive MVP, I would have taken Juwan Jennings, who was obviously thrown out of Sunday's game, I think, in an unfortunate circumstance. I thought the refs did not need to throw a second unsportsmanlike conduct foul on Jennings in 2 plays, and he ultimately finishes 25 yards shy of 1,000 yards receiving on the season. But it just goes to show how much growth Jennings has had in a 49ers uniform and how much of a bargain the 49ers got last season when they were able to hand out that contract extension to the wide receiver, who in a year where Deebo Samuel did not produce, where their rookie first-round draft pick, Ricky Pearsall, wasn't really himself until the final weeks of the season, obviously with the traumatic shooting that he endured back in the month of August, and Brandon Ayuk dealing with the holdout that he put himself into, and then the ACL injury that happened shortly after he took the field this season. Juwan Jennings was a standout for the 49ers. So while George Kittle was the offensive MVP for this team, no doubt that Juwan Jennings made a huge impression on 49ers fans. Deserves credit, probably second in that category for me if I'm breaking down the 49ers offense. If we're looking at defensive MVP, to me, this is really a toss-up. And I think, again, you ask most people, and they would tell you that it's Diamador Lenore. And I completely agree that Lenore had a great season. I'm thrilled the 49ers have locked this guy up, 5-year, $92 million contract extension, and I'm really happy with the timing, doing it during the season while he's having a career year at the NFL level. I think that this just sends the right message to young players on that defense. The 49ers have a lot of them. You look at Malik Mustafa, Jair Brown. You've got some young linebackers who factored in at the end of the season once Devondre Campbell was off the roster. Some young defensive linemen. Evan Anderson was really fun to watch this year. When you see a teammate get paid like Diamador Lenore did, when you see him earn that contract on the field, I think it's a real tone setter. I think it really sets a foundation, a culture for a franchise, and I was thrilled to see that happen. But I will say, I think that this was maybe closer than people realize, because while you always count on Fred Warner playing at an elite level, playing at a borderline Hall of Fame worthy level, this year he took a step back and he was still a significant factor for the 49ers on the defensive side of the ball. Remember, Fred Warner has been accustomed throughout his career to playing alongside Dre Greenlaw, who I think we can all acknowledge after watching the 49ers this season was such an integral component of Fred Warner's success on defense. He was able to be freed up on the defensive side of the ball, go pursue the run, knowing that Greenlaw would have the cutback lane, drop back deep in coverage, knowing that Greenlaw could handle the flat routes. And if the quarterback escaped, Greenlaw would be there. This year, Fred Warner did not play with that luxury. When Devondre Campbell was out there, he was a liability for the San Francisco 49ers, and the way that Fred Warner was able to juggle more responsibility for this defense this season, I thought was really admirable. And the other reason that I give Fred Warner a lot of credit for the way that he handled himself this year, he had the fractured bone after the Patriots game in his ankle, and he played down to the whistle in Week 18. You know, when the 49ers were eliminated, Fred Warner very easily could have raised his hand and said, no, I'm out. That's it. Going to go get surgery. Going to go rest up for next season. I had a great time this year, but you guys can take care of it from here. Instead, he stayed on the field. And I think it is very difficult to do that in the NFL. It's very difficult to do that when you're accustomed to playing deep in the playoffs and you've got nothing left to play for. So I admire Fred Warner. I think he deserves a lot of credit for the way that he handled the end of this season in particular, knowing that he wasn't at full strength, but knowing that he was still the best option and his team needed him out there on the field to set the tone. I give him credit. Still, the Defensive Player of the Year goes to Lenore in my mind, someone who just popped off the page from the very beginning of training camp. Every beat reporter out there in Santa Clara was raving about the advancements that he'd made in his game. Was able to play inside corner, nickel corner, which I think is the toughest position in the modern NFL. I give Diamador Lenore a lot of credit for the way that he handled himself this season. Up next, Time for our Offensive Rookie of the Year award as we continue with our 49ers superlatives. Again, not all these awards are going to be good, but we're starting off with a few good ones as well. We'll toss in a few bad honors, some ideas I got a few years ago when I first read Jason Stark at the end of each baseball season. He would do the Cy Young Award and then the Cy Yuck Award for the worst pitcher in Major League Baseball. He'd do most valuable player and least valuable player. We'll do some things like that tonight for the San Francisco 49ers, but up next, it's the Offensive Rookie of the Year for this team, and Dominic Puni was the very easy choice. The right guard coming out of Kansas just stabilized an offensive line position, which is something that we haven't really seen throughout the Kyle Shanahan era of a guy coming in as a rookie and starting at an offensive line position and thriving at that position. Puni very well played his way into Pro Bowl consideration at the right guard spot, and it's a position the 49ers won't have to worry about for the next 3 seasons as he's under contract. And so you look at him as someone who could be here for the long haul. And I think the 49ers have a lot of work to do rebuilding the offensive line and figuring out ways that they can protect Brock Purdy and free up the run game in the future, But Dominic Puni playing a huge role in setting the tone for the 49ers this season in that regard. So up next, now that Puni has received his honor from Sports Phone KNBR, let's move on to our Defensive Rookie of the Year. And to me, this one very well could have been split between Renardo Green, who I thought did a very good job as a rookie corner for the San Francisco 49ers, but I'll give it to Malik Mustafa. And the reason being, Mustafa is a player who came into a position where the 49ers felt like they were relatively set. They had Talanoa Hufanga coming back from injury. They had Jair Brown hoping to make the leap in his second year at the NFL level. And both of those players were in and out of the lineup for much of this season. And when Mustafa had to play, and it was often, but he didn't have to play early. He didn't have to play really the first 2-3 weeks of the season. When he had to play, he stepped up to the occasion. He looked the part of an NFL safety. This is a 4th-round draft pick and someone who wasn't taken higher up because he doesn't have that elite speed at the safety position. He wasn't considered a ball hawk at Wake Forest, but he was a sure tackler. And you watch this 49ers defense this season, the one thing that I really felt that they lacked, both at the defensive line level, the linebacker level, and corner and safety level, all 3 levels of the defense, there was just a lot of poor tackling, a lot of poor form on defense outside of what I thought was a relatively bad scheme from Nick Sorensen compared to other defensive coordinators that Kyle Shanahan has had. And Mustafa didn't suffer from that issue. This is someone who played a lot of ball in college, and this is why I'm in favor of taking those guys who were 5- and 6-year players at the college level now that things have changed with NIL, now that you're free to transfer up and change schools and go to different levels. I think you have to take advantage of that opportunity when you're a franchise selecting players in the middle rounds. The 49ers hit on a player in Malik Mustafa, who I think could be a big part of this defense's future. So he's the Defensive Rookie of the Year for me. Really like what I saw at times from Renardo Green this season. Absolutely in consideration. But for a 2nd-round draft pick, I think in a perfect world, you would go into next season knowing that he is absolutely holding down one of those starting corner spots. And I could see the 49ers using some resources in free agency to challenge Green or drafting someone who could challenge Green, whereas Mustafa, I think, will be locked in long-term at the safety position for this team. So with that, let's go to the best surprise for the 49ers in this 2024 season. And again, there weren't a whole lot of great surprises for a team that finished at 6-11. Pretty much everything was a disappointment this year. Pretty much everything did not go this team's way or live up to expectation. But I will tell you, the end of the season for rookie wide receiver Ricky Pearsall, I thought was really encouraging for the San Francisco 49ers. I thought that the way that Pearsall closed out his campaign, specifically on Monday Night Football with the 8-catch, 141-yard, 1-touchdown performance against the Detroit Lions, was the best surprise to me because way back in August, after the traumatic shooting down at Union Square, I did not think that we were going to see Ricky Pearsall at all this year. I think that his recovery was so inspiring and miraculous in the way that he's handled himself. I mean, just listening to the clips of Pearsall talking today in front of his locker down in Santa Clara at Levi's Stadium, such an inspiring young wide receiver and someone who I think, he's going to be a key component of this 49ers offense for years to come. And just a few weeks ago, I was worried. I was wondering, is he going to be able to live up to the high expectations that have been set by other players drafted in similar places on the board, like Ladd McConkey taken, 3 picks behind Pearsall by the Los Angeles Chargers. He's become the go-to guy for Justin Herbert down there in L.A., and they're obviously going to the playoffs together. McConkey will have the opportunity to shine on an even bigger stage. But right now, I love the grit and the tenacity that we saw toward the end of the regular season from Pearsall. He catches 8 balls, like I said, against the Detroit Lions, 6 catches, 69 yards, and a touchdown against the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday. Somebody the 49ers and their fans can look forward to having in the fold next season. And because Brandon Ayuk is coming off the ACL, and because Deebo Samuel is coming off a very down season, which he very clearly lost a step at the wide receiver position, you've got to have some hope. You've got to have the ability for Brock Purdy to have a go-to wide receiver, and it is entirely possible that next year Ricky Pearsall emerges as that guy. Am I predicting a 100-catch season? Absolutely not. Am I projecting a 1,000-yard season? There's no way you can do that. But 31 catches, 400 yards for Pearsall, and after what transpired during the preseason, I think that is about the best case scenario. We're all looking forward to watching more Ricky Pearsall in 2025. So with that said, we've got offensive MVP, George Kittle, defensive MVP, Deommodore Lenoir, offensive rookie of the year, Dominic Pooney, defensive rookie of the year, Malik Mustafa, best surprise, Ricky Pearsall's finish of the season out of the way. It's time for some of the worst awards, some of the bad awards, some of the honors that players and coaches don't want to be receiving. And I'll go with the worst surprise to me this season. It was the structure of Nick Sorensen's scheme. We'd heard so much about the 49ers' ability to develop coaches internally under Kyle Shanahan, and how, hey, they didn't need Steve Wilks to come back because there was someone in the building who could do the job better than Steve Wilks was doing it. And to me, I didn't see the 49ers defense take a step forward this year under Nick Sorensen. In fact, so much of the defense this year looked incredibly vanilla to me. It was a defense that rushed 4 and dropped 7. It felt like 85-90% of the time. And I know that the numbers won't bear that out, but the creativity was lacking. We never saw corner blitzes. We never saw disguise blitzes. We never saw a 4-man front that was stemming at the line of scrimmage, that was, forcing the opponent to second guess its run scheme and run blocking approaches. This was a 49ers defense that was consistently moved off the ball, consistently struggled to get to the quarterback. And I think as far as Sorensen's scheme goes, there's a lot of room for growth. We don't know if he's coming back next year as the 49ers defensive coordinator or what Kyle Shanahan will do, but I will say I was relatively unimpressed in year 1. So let's move on. After the worst surprise of the season being Nick Sorensen's scheme on defense, let's go to the least valuable player. And there's really 2 categories for the 49ers here. Least valuable player who was on the field and least valuable player who was off the field, because there's one guy who took away so much through his injury. He couldn't control it, of course, but let's start with the least valuable player on the field for the 49ers, and that was Jake Moody, the kicker, who, of course, the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan took with the 3rd-round draft pick just last year. We thought that he was going to be the bridge to the future from Robbie Gould. This was a guy who was supposed to be just as accurate during the regular season, a guy who could nail money kicks from deep in the playoffs, and it just didn't pan out for Jake Moody. And who knows what the 49ers' plans are at the kicker position. All I know is it is unlikely that Jake Moody will be the guy next year. And I've seen a few things. The injury derailed him. Having a different, placeholder derailed him by not having Mitch Wishnowsky back there. The bottom line is, in the NFL, you're judged on the number of kicks that you make. And each time the 49ers were kicking from beyond 40 yards, Jake Moody was under 50%. So that is not a recipe for success. Least valuable player in terms of the performance the 49ers didn't get this season has to be Christian McCaffrey. Of course, Brandon Ayuk was out for much of the season with the injury, and no one loved the way that Ayuk was dealing with the holdout situation early in training camp. It really dragged on throughout the preseason, but it would just be a completely different season, and I truly do believe we'd be talking about a 49ers team that would be headed to the playoffs, headed for a wild card round matchup if Christian McCaffrey was healthy all season long and ready to go. Of course, the Achilles injuries, those kept him out of the lineup, and then the knee issue that, of course, took place against Buffalo, it just derailed this season. He's such an integral part of this offense. Kyle Shanahan clearly couldn't run the type of offense that he wanted to, and it's so clear that Brock Purdy needs Christian McCaffrey back there to help him maximize the potential of this offense. So you're hoping that one of the byproducts of the 49ers missing the playoffs and looking ahead to a healthier 2025 in which they're not putting mileage on their bodies with wild card, divisional, and conference championship round matchups is a healthier version of this group. And to me, that all starts with a healthy Christian McCaffrey in 2025. So Our awards, our superlatives, our honors, they go on for the 49ers at the end of the 2024 season. Looking at the best win of the season for the 49ers, I think there's a few different games that you could look at and say they've played really complete football. But I go to the Bears game just a few weeks ago in the month of December where they came out, and there was still some hope for this team at that time. They absolutely dominated a Chicago team that was still playing hard to the end of the season. Remember, the Bears won on Sunday against the Green Bay Packers, even though they had an interim head coach and they changed coordinators. All sorts of things went wrong for Chicago this season. There's still talent there. It's still a reason that the Bears are one of the sought-after destinations for prospective head coaches this offseason. 49ers absolutely took it to them. It was Brock Purdy's best performance of the season. It was the throwback day that reminded you of Brock Purdy from 2023 and why you hope that the 49ers can harness that version of Purdy at the quarterback position headed in next season. Now, we'll wrap things up with the worst loss of the season. To me, you pick from any of the divisional losses the 49ers suffered this year. Those really took a toll in terms of their playoff hopes, in terms of their ability to win the NFC West. And it's a completely different season if they control their own division, if they don't collapse in the fourth quarter. You look at the Rams game early on this season, Ronnie Bell's drop, and of course Jake Moody's missed kick. That really hurt. The Seahawks game, Geno Smith driving 11 plays, 80 yards against a 49ers defense that had been worn down. But to me, the most inexplicable loss of the season was the defeat to the Arizona Cardinals at home, a 13-point fourth-quarter lead that evaporates in the 100-plus degree heat at Levi's Stadium. Inexcusable to lose to a Cardinals team that was clearly at a talent deficiency compared to the 49ers. At that juncture of the season, it took things off the rails. The 49ers were never the same team. They couldn't recover, and that, to me, is one that will stick for years to come as you look at the way the 49ers handled business in their own division. You know, you look at yesterday's game, no Brock Purdy, a lot of guys on defense out. Hard to make big picture analysis of a Week 18 loss where you've got nothing to play for. But early in the season, when the 49ers were still playing for something, that loss to the Arizona Cardinals really, really stings. So to recap, our offensive MVP of the year, George Kittle. Defensive MVP, Deommodore Lenoir. Rookie of the year, Dominic Pooney. On offense, on defense, it's Malik Mustafa. Our biggest surprise in a good way, Ricky Pearsall's finish to the season. Our worst surprise in a bad way, Nick Sorensen's scheme, or the lack thereof, on defense for the 49ers. Least valuable player who was on the field, Jake Moody. You can make the case that Devondre Campbell also deserved consideration for that award. Least valuable player who was off the field. He took so much away when he went down with the injuries. It was Christian McCaffrey, a completely different season if he was healthy. I'll say the best win was over the Bears. I'd hear arguments for the Cowboys, even the Patriots or the Jets, but the Bears game was the most complete win for the 49ers. And the worst loss, pick from any of the 11, I'll take the defeat against the Arizona Cardinals, the 13-point collapse in the fourth quarter at home earlier this season. So when we come back, we will finish up with a preview of the Wildcard Weekend games here in the NFL. We've also got two college games, one on Thursday night, one on Friday night. It's Friday's Texas versus Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, where it's projected to be very cold in Dallas this week. So I'm Kerry Crowley. We're rolling here on Sports Phone KNBR. You're listening to KNBR 104.5, 680, the sports leader.
Speak your mind on the sports leader. Sports Phone KNBR keeps coming at you. Streaming live at twitch.tv/the sports leader.
All right, we're back here on Sports Phone KNBR. Kerry Crowley rolling with you until 9 o'clock this evening. Appreciate everyone who dialed us in during the first hour of tonight's show, talking about 49ers changes. What needs to be different next season when the 49ers open things up against, albeit a much softer schedule next year, but this team will still face some of the significant questions that they encountered down the stretch once things went south for them. Of course, all the division losses that we covered earlier this evening and in our last segment, the losses to the Arizona Cardinals, the Los Angeles Rams, the Seattle Seahawks, they all came back to haunt this team. And while injuries definitely kept them out of the playoffs, it was those divisional losses that hurt this team the most. That's why the Rams were representing the NFC West and not the Seahawks, not the 49ers, of course, not the team that defeated them on Sunday, the Arizona Cardinals. So I wanted to wrap up tonight's show this evening talking about Wildcard Weekend, something the 49ers haven't had to participate a whole lot in during the Kyle Shanahan era, but in part because they've been the 1 seed. They were the team that dominated the regular season. They were the team that last year jumped out to such a great start that no one could catch them. And while they felt as if they were invincible during the playoffs last year, we all saw how close the calls were against Green Bay and Detroit. And then ultimately in the Super Bowl, it was too close of a call against the Kansas City Chiefs. They got out to the good start, but fell apart in the fourth quarter and overtime. And that is why the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. That's why the Chiefs have the opportunity to go for history here, win 3 in a row. So not going to break down anything with regard to the Kansas City Chiefs this weekend, as they've got the 1 seed in the AFC. Not going to talk about the Detroit Lions, who locked up the 1 seed in impressive fashion, shutting down Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday Night Football, I should say. It's Monday night tonight, and the Lions lock up the 1 seed. So we're going to talk about every Wildcard Weekend matchup, make some picks, and move forward discussing a weekend of football that won't have the San Francisco 49ers involved. I hate to say it, but we'll have all offseason to dwell on all the changes that this organization must consider. So up first in the AFC, 2 seed Buffalo Bills up against the number 7 Denver Broncos. Josh Allen, MVP candidate. I don't think he will ultimately win it because I'm going with Lamar Jackson. I think he'll get his 3rd. I think that he finished the season on such a strong note, and a 2nd consecutive Christmas Day where Lamar showed off. But Josh Allen, nevertheless, one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL, up against the rookie in Bo Nix. And while Nix and Sean Payton have been an impressive combination, I think that offense has taken yet another step during the second half of this season. It's just going to be incredibly difficult for the Denver Broncos with a rookie quarterback to go on the road to Buffalo in January and win. We all saw earlier this season, albeit the 49ers were not healthy, but the challenges that they faced headed into Orchard Park. There was the lake effect that night when the 49ers were taking on the Bills on Sunday Night Football, and it was a disaster from the start. I don't think that this will be a disaster, but I'll take the Bills winning this with ease. Their defense has gotten a little bit better. Bills have got some decent Super Bowl chances as well. They're one of the teams that I really think can go toe-to-toe with the Kansas City Chiefs on the right day. They've got the offensive firepower with Josh Allen. Of course, James Cook has had a great year out of that backfield. So I will take Buffalo over Denver, as I believe most people will. Sean Payton and his crew with the opportunity to pull the upset this weekend. On the number 3 seed, the Baltimore Ravens up against the number 6 seed Pittsburgh Steelers. AFC North matchup, and the Steelers have just trended in the wrong direction for the last several weeks. Of course, the loss on Saturday, the Cincinnati Bengals, who, look, if the Bengals had got into the playoffs as the 6th or the 7th seed, that would have been a scary matchup for a 2 or a 3 seed like Buffalo or Baltimore. But nevertheless, it is the Steelers who racked up the wins early in the season. It was Justin Fields who helped the Steelers rack up wins early in the season. Then Russell Wilson came on, and Mike Tomlin looked like the savant for the decision that he made to move on from Justin Fields. I believe at the time was undefeated when the Steelers made that change and go to Russell Wilson. They never missed a beat, and then all of a sudden, down the stretch, the Steelers started to fall apart, but they racked up enough wins to keep themselves in wild card contention. They ultimately secure the 6th seed in the AFC, and what does that earn them? A trip to go up to Baltimore and take on the Ravens this weekend. The Steelers are 3-1 against the Ravens in the playoffs over the last few seasons, but the Baltimore Ravens are a team, I think, with a great offense. Derrick Henry, we saw him running away on Saturday night against the Cleveland Browns in that one. And I just think that he's the type of back that you want winning football in January. You want to be able to give the ball to him in the month of January, have him bruise that second level of the defense, the linebackers, interior corner, safeties as well. And I think that Buffalo is set up for a potentially very deep run. We saw the Christmas Day showdown against the Houston Texans, another playoff team in the AFC. They romped to a win in that one. They are firing on all cylinders. I think the Ravens, like the Buffalo Bills, will have the opportunity to deny the Kansas City Chiefs that 3rd consecutive Super Bowl title. So give me the Ravens in this one. Then you've got your 4-5 matchup in the AFC. And this is where I think things will get interesting in the AFC because the Houston Texans are the 4 seed by virtue of winning that AFC South. A soft AFC South this year. Of course, the Titans secured the number 1 overall pick. The Jacksonville Jaguars were in contention for that number 1 overall pick as well. The Indianapolis Colts not really relevant down the stretch, whereas the Chargers played in a much more difficult division in that AFC West. The Chiefs, of course, in that division. The Denver Broncos, another playoff team. So the West gets 3 teams. I think that Jim Harbaugh's squad is well equipped to make a run in the playoffs. That defense has been good from the outset of the season. That's what you're going to need to stop C.J. Stroud, who, of course, does not have Tank Dell. He's out for the season after having that surgery. Joe Mixon slowed down a little bit over the last few weeks of the season. I think if the Chargers are able to stop the run, C.J. Stroud has had more of a sophomore slump than I think most people realize. He was obviously incredible as a rookie coming out of Ohio State, immediately elevated that Houston Texans team for DeMeco Ryans, but I'll take the Chargers in this one, and I think that Jim Harbaugh, in his first year as the Chargers head coach, is going to have the opportunity to do something real special and real fun in the AFC. So I haven't looked ahead. Is it going to be the Chargers against the Chiefs in that second round divisional matchup? If so, that could get really interesting because the Chargers with that defense, they could slow down Kansas City. Didn't watch the regular season matchups too closely, but the Chiefs are going to have the week off. They'll have the opportunity to rest, reevaluate things, but get Jim Harbaugh's team hot and anything can happen in the AFC. So with that, let's move ahead to the NFC matchups this week. Philadelphia Eagles against the Green Bay Packers this weekend. The Eagles are the 2 seed, the Packers the 7 seed. Both teams dealing with some interesting injury situations right now. Earlier today, it came out that Jalen Hurts is not yet out of concussion protocol. Of course, missed the final game of the season, missed the last 2 weeks of the season with the concussion. This is a rematch of that week 1 matchup. Believe it or not, Eagles and Green Bay Packers way back in September, they met each other in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The Eagles won that game 34-29. Would not shock me at all if this 2 seed versus the 7 seed Green Bay Packers was close. The Packers dealing with a Christian Watson injury. He and Jordan Love went out on the same drive against the Chicago Bears in that loss to the Bears on Sunday. Love, of course, was able to come back into that game or was healthy enough to do so. I don't know that he ultimately did return to the game, but Watson with the ACL injury, that's devastating for Green Bay. I think that's going to hurt the young receiving corps, specifically against an Eagles team that prides itself on its great defense. Even if they don't have Jalen Hurts ready to go, the Eagles are capable of winning a game in the playoffs. That unit led by Vic Fangio has been really, really good throughout the second half of this season. Remember, at one point, the Eagles were sitting at 2-2 this season. They were one of the teams that early in the year, when the Jets moved on from Robert Saleh, it was believed that the Eagles were maybe 1-2 more losses away from potentially changing head coaches. Nick Sirianni could have been on his way out in Philadelphia. Instead, what do? They go 12-1 over their final 13 games. An incredible run. Saquon Barkley, of course, a massive part of this. Talked about the running back who's lifted up the AFC North team in the Baltimore Ravens. That's Derrick Henry. Saquon Barkley changing teams this offseason, going from the dire situation with the New York Giants all the way over to Philadelphia with the Eagles. And it's been incredible to see 2,000 yards in just 16 games played. Would have had the opportunity to challenge Eric Dickerson's record if he had played in that 17th game against the New York Giants. Ultimately did not have to do so. And so Philly comes in the healthier team right now because they've got Barkley fresh. It wouldn't shock me at all if the Packers won this game, because I think that Green Bay is one of those teams, because they play in Green Bay, frozen tundra, difficult conditions all season long. I could envision a scenario where the Packers go in and beat the Eagles, but I will still take Philadelphia. I think this is going to be much closer than that 2-7 matchup in the AFC, where you've got the Bills against the Denver Broncos. And the Bills, of course, have the huge home field advantage in Buffalo. But nevertheless, I like the Packers' chances, even if I'm not picking them to win. So let's move on to the next matchup in the NFC. It was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who ultimately secured the number 3 seed by winning the AFC South. By winning the NFC South. Came down to the final day of the regular season. The Falcons end up losing. The Bucs come from behind in relatively unimpressive fashion and beat the New Orleans Saints. It was an uninspired performance during the first half for Baker Mayfield and his Bucs. They will host the Washington Commanders, and all season long, you heard me during the first half, really the first 10, 11 weeks of the season here on KNBR on Sports Phone, talk about if the 49ers were to make the playoffs this year, if they were to somehow win their games down the stretch and become the 4 seed, I was rooting for them to face the number 5 seed, the Washington Commanders. I was rooting for the Commanders to lock up the number 5 seed back when that was possible. We're talking, October conversations that we were having here on the leader. And I said, because I don't trust rookie quarterbacks on the road in the playoffs, no matter how good and how talented a quarterback is, how great of a season he's had. Jaden Daniels is the rookie of the year, running away with it. Better season than Bo Nix in my eyes. He's got some incredible moments, including the Hail Mary against the Chicago Bears. It is very difficult to pick a rookie quarterback to win on the road. Now, with that being said, I'm still going to take the Commanders. I thought that would have been the matchup that the 49ers had wanted had they been able to run the table and get into the playoffs as the NFC West champions with 10 wins. Didn't materialize, but because the Bucs look weak right now, because the Bucs defense has been relatively bad over the second half of this season, 49ers saw that up close earlier this year. I will take the Commanders on the road. A little more rookie magic for Jaden Daniels. It's a franchise that's hungry for success. They're very eager to have it in the playoffs. And I think Jaden Daniels, in his first season with Dan Quinn as the head coach there in Washington, they will find it. It brings me to the next matchup, and maybe the most intriguing of the weekend. Final wildcard matchup to talk about right now. You've got the Los Angeles Rams and the Minnesota Vikings. The Rams, the 4th seed, by winning the NFC West, they lock that up. The Vikings lose in pretty big fashion. It was kind of an uninspiring conclusion to an epic NFL regular season for the Minnesota Vikings, who finish 14-3, the winningest team in the wild card era to not win a division. 14 wins. They will go on the road to SoFi Stadium, which I think does benefit the Minnesota Vikings and Sam Darnold. You don't want to be the 5 seed playing, a 4 seed that plays its game outdoors. You don't want to be a team going on the road to a situation like a Buffalo in the AFC, which is what Denver has to do as the 7 seed. You want to be able to play in a controlled environment. That's what the Minnesota Vikings will be able to do down at SoFi Stadium. Sure, there will be a lot more Rams fans than there are in that stadium than there are for San Francisco 49ers games, but I think that the Minnesota Vikings will take this one. I think that Kevin O'Connell bounces back as the head coach and the play caller for that offense. I think that Sam Darnold doesn't have 2 duds in a row. Remember, this is a quarterback in Sam Darnold who's awaiting a potentially huge payday this offseason, and if he struggles in the wild card round, a lot of that money that he's made over the first 16, 17 weeks of the season, that could evaporate for him. And Minnesota could be the team that was the great story all season long that all of a sudden would fall apart over the final 2 weeks. We'll remember Sunday Night Football because so many of us tuned in. We wanted to see the epic matchup. I, for one, was rooting for the Vikings. I wanted to see them slay the juggernaut in the Detroit Lions, who've been such a great story all season. But nevertheless, the Vikings not really in it. Sam Darnold with some ill-advised throws in that ball game, and the Lions win it going away, locking up the number 1 seed. It sends the Vikings on the road, but I will still take them against the Rams, who've been up and down all season. Obviously, Matthew Stafford has got a lot of playoff experience under his belt. Sean McVay has won a Super Bowl with Stafford, but I just don't think this team is as strong. They've got some nice rookies on that defensive line. Jared Verse is really good. They're going to be a troublesome team for the 49ers over the next several seasons, but I will still take Minnesota going on the road and winning that game. So to recap our wildcard weekend breakdown, give me the Baltimore Ravens over the Pittsburgh Steelers, 3 seed over the 6 seed in the AFC. Give me the Buffalo Bills, 2 seed over the visiting Denver Broncos, the 7 seed in the AFC, and then the one upset, I will take Jim Harbaugh's Los Angeles Chargers over the 4th seeded Houston Texans, who got that by virtue of winning their own division. In the NFC, I expect tight matchups all around. Give me the Eagles over the Packers this weekend, even if it's a close game and even if Jalen Hurts is unable to go. Take the Commanders on the road over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who did not look good in Week 18 of the regular season against the Saints. And then give me the Vikings on the road. 2 upsets in the NFC, 1 upset in the AFC. The NFC West will be shut out of the divisional round next weekend. So that does it for our NFL picks for the weekend. That does it for me for tonight. I'll be back with you on Wednesday evening, special edition of the Giants Hot Stove League show. You'll have Giants hitting coach Pat Burrell joining me. We potentially get Giants catcher Patrick Bailey on the line. We'll keep you updated on Wednesday for that show. But right now, I want to sign off. Thank our producer, Jacob Violante, who did such a great job tonight. Thanks to all of you, the loyal listeners of KNBR as well. I'm Kerry Crowley saying so long for the evening. You're listening to KNBR 104.5 680, the sports leader.
Your home of the entire NFL postseason.